This is Alien Jesus 5 Legacy on Nightowls.
Broadcasting live from high atop the J.P. White Building in downtown Roswell, New Mexico. It's Morning with Mike Winters on 106.5 Roswell's Talk FM. Is that what I sound like when I talk?
That is indeed what he sounds like when he talks. Does that give you a clue as to where I am at the present moment? Yeah, we've got up very, very early this morning to come to a place I've always wanted to visit. And finally, I'm here. I must admit, parked up after driving from Las Vegas. It's about 80 or so miles. Here I am. There's a fence in front of me. The ground around looks flat. Driven through tiny little towns where everything is alien related. Every pub is called the Ale Inn Bar, and get your alien burgers and your alien sodas, alien fresh fruit grown on Area 51, and here I am. I've just arrived. I parked at kind of an entrance area. I was there for 2 minutes, and I was moved on by a huge white utility vehicle that just bounded out of nowhere, said, "This is private land, you must move on." And I said, "Well, I'm just stopping for..." She said, "You're not stopping." Whoa. So if this has nothing to hide, what are they hiding? As I say, only been here probably 10, 15 minutes, and I've had to drive a little bit further along a very bleak and empty highway that I'm sure I've seen on the front of some Eagles albums over the years. There's warnings on every sign. There's people selling alien barbecue food in pubs 3 kilometers up the road. There's even a big green sign with pictures of aliens and saying that I am on the extraterrestrial highway. How cool is that? Well, it is cool to be here. How much can I see? How much can I tell you about? Well, that remains to be seen. Otherwise, I'm just going to be sitting in the car learning as much as I can off Roswell's very own talk station. But let's get out. Let's get to it. Because tonight, beginning in Roswell, deep in the steaming hot Nevada desert, even at this time in the morning, Alan Robson begins our next adventure, Alien Jesus 5.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army. Army officers say the missile, found sometime last week, has been inspected at Roswell, New Mexico, and sent to Wright Field, Ohio, for further inspection.
I was instructed by Colonel Blanchard to put out a press release, which in effect stated that we had in our possession a flying saucer.
Roswell, the story they tried to cover up 70 years on.
The more I saw the fragments, the more I realized that it wasn't anything that I was acquainted with.
They called the mortuary here to find out if there was anything that they could preserve the bodies with.
What could they have been hiding from us for the past 70 years?
He come out of there, he come all scared, and he said, they saw 2 little men with the big heads. But one was alive, still alive.
General DuBose said that specifically to us, that the balloon explanation that the Air Force offered was a cover story to get the reporters off General Rainey's back. So we have a wide body of testimony that was a cover-up. We have military witnesses saying they were sworn to secrecy.
The greatest mystery of all time.
I have that top secret, ultra top secret document right here in my hot little hand. This is a government document that acknowledges the existence and the visitation of extraterrestrial life to Earth.
This is Alien Jesus 5 Legacy.
Now you may ask, why is it taking me till Alien Jesus 5 to come here? This very month is the 70th anniversary of those craft coming down here at Roswell. 70 years this month. Now, as I said, there's a main highway that's not very far away from the main area of Roswell. I don't know whether you can hear that motorway right in the background. It's over a batch of scrub land, and there's one or two trees around and about the place. The thing that's most interesting about it is I actually came here so that I could find out if the place was benign or not. You know, we've heard a million stories, but you think it can't possibly be true that the aliens in there and they've operated on them and they've got a spacecraft that they've back-engineered. And I remember telling you that story in Alien Jesus 1. So I thought, to come here, I'm probably going to find that everybody welcomes you. The birds are, hello birds, American blue jays popping around on fences and what have you. And you would think, well, what are we going to do then? Will they welcome us and say, hi and welcome to Roswell? Do you want to buy an inflatable alien or a little toy alien like everybody seems to have around about here? And yet, the first thing I did, pull up outside, probably a side road leading in. Big, huge fences saying, keep out, government land, government property, all that kind of thing. And yet, the reality of it is, then this huge, white, all-terrain vehicle arrives. Two guys, one with a shotgun. A shotgun? I'm only on my own. I mean, what possible use to point a shotgun at me? You know, if they're trying to say we've got nothing to hide here, why would they point a shotgun at a tourist? Unbelievable. Anyway, across tonight's show, we are travelling, as always, all over the world. We're going to see quite a few things here from the United States. I've been bombing around. We're going to be talking to incredible people in my quest to prove definitively that alien life has been here. We followed the chain of Jesus' family, his children. We followed the chain of the Illuminati. Tonight, head on. Did they come to Earth? Absolutely. Tonight, we've got an answer for you. Let's get straight to it. Are aliens contacting us? Stephen Hawking's Breakthrough Listen project is looking into bizarre light signals from 234 different stars right now. This is not just a little star twinkling in the sky miles and miles and miles away. Specifically, 234 of the stars that maybe you can see some of these late at night if you live far enough out in the countryside. And they believe absolutely that they're showing signs of alien life. Astronomers have found extraterrestrial signals that have exactly the shape of light pulses that could be produced only by alien beings. They've made controversial findings combing through 2.5 million readings. And there's a lot of people who dispute the evidence. But Stephen Hawking is absolutely positive that aliens, if they're not already here, are certainly making contact. Here's some of the noises captured by people of alien pulses being sent from space. Now think about this. This is a pulse that has to travel across the galaxy. At this moment, we, humble earthlings, have no way of replicating this or even sending it back. Believers claim that, unknown to the vast millions on Earth, that there's a vast array of extraterrestrial life forms all over our galaxy, and they've been visiting Earth for millions of years before the first Lyran ancestors of the human race colonized not just the planet, but also the moon, hence recent sightings of buildings being found on the moon. According to the ancient astronaut theory, these extraterrestrials visited Earth as gods, descending from the sky in the bright light chariots, and all of the things that we've covered so often on other Alien Jesus shows. Sophisticated flying craft that can get here. Based on testimonies of highly reliable sources, researchers, scientists, professors, and even before Canada's Parliament, they brought a government cover-up of UFO information, specifically of extraterrestrials having visited Earth in advanced spacecraft. In Parliament, they talked about Syrians, not spelled S-Y like the Syria that we have, S-I-R, from Sirius. The Syrians apparently have imparted knowledge of mathematics and astronomy that helped in the construction of the monuments in ancient history, things like pyramids and temples. Then there was an alien species in contact with Earth known as the short greys from the Zeta Reticuli system. Short greys are 3 to 5 foot tall with large heads and oversized dark pool eyes. They're believed to be genetically engineered drones designed to serve a superior tall grey alien race. Tall greys conduct high-level diplomatic contact with humans, and they're represented in the world's shadow government. They may well be those behind the Illuminati. According to alien folklore, they arrived on Earth more than 600,000 years before our ancestors arrived 200,000 years ago. Reptilian, warlike, bloodthirsty. They have infiltrated human society. They have interbred, infecting humanity with their genes, and they use human beings against their own kind. Now, it sounds far-fetched, yet according to the research that we've done, there's incredible proof all over the place that different alien species exist. Dracos, Algarians, Algartians, Altaceans, Amphibians, Anakim, Andromedas, Nimrods, Antares, Atlans, Algrulax, Ark, Albram, Barvies, Benarians, Blue People, the Blues, Butas, Sentients, Torsentients, Chameleons, Chirons, Deros. I could go on for a day. There are thousands. And each different alien species has a slightly different colour, has a slightly different way of speaking. And is that the reason that, unlike some planets where everybody speaks the same language, is it because Earth was a stopping off point that there are so many colours of humans and so many different languages? Even in the northeast of England, from Scotland down to Yorkshire. There's 50 or 60 different dialects. And is this really where they all came from? And think about it for a second. Imagine if, back at a time when we were coming out of the slime, and then we saw these amazing characters coming down from the stars, if they really did give us our colour and give us our speech and give us all the different accents, is it too far-fetched to think that one would come down and go, "Hey up, our kid"? Joking aside, if somebody from Sweden heard that, or somebody who was living in Australia heard that, it would be as alien to them as what we see on alien movies today. We mentioned the moon and how they've seen various buildings on the moon, and even during the space landing, the very first landing on the moon, there's said to be dialogue from the moon landing where one of the astronauts says he can see different craft moving up one of the sand dunes. I mean, going against gravity. And this is an alien craft on the moon during the moon landing.
60 seconds. I saw this illumination that was moving with respect to the stars. We were smart enough to not say, Houston, there's a light out there that's following us. So technically it becomes an unidentified flying object.
While Neil and Buzz were on the lunar surface, Neil switched to the medical channel and spoke directly with the chief medical officer, saying, "They're here, they're parked on the side of the crater, they're watching us."
There may also be ancient civilizations on Mars. UFO hunters claim to have found walled cities. And not walled cities that they're making out of fuzzy photographs. These are beautiful videos from the Elysium Planitia near Mars equator. The pictures taken by NASA themselves. The images show a number of aerial views. Some of them look like eroded domes that could have been surrounded by other circular rings. And if you can imagine the buildings there were circular, perhaps to protect what alien species from the atmosphere there. It would fit in perfectly. And this is on the Martian equator. When the video first came out, it met with mixed reaction. However, the structures firmly show signs of life. They have doorway areas. Why would you have a doorway unless there were people walking through it? Other people say, no, it's a natural geographical process. This is what happens in geology. Things make strange shapes. But in this particular case, it's huge groups of buildings together, almost like streets, others looking like factories, all taken from NASA's Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, the MRO. A lot of people say that by doing this, we're just expanding conspiracy theories. But there's proof here on Earth. The Iraqi government, and let's face it, they haven't been given much credence since the invasion, but the Iraqi government have admitted that Nibiru and the Anunnaki are real. Now, what is Nibiru? Nibiru is that planet that they talk about. And yet, they have gone back into Iraqi history, and this is what their history says. It's a visit to the Daikar Governorate. The Iraqi transport minister said the Daikar was the venue of the world's first ever airport. And it was built 7,000 years ago in Iraq by the ancient Sumerians. He said ancient aliens, the Anunnaki, used the airport for space exploration, and it was from there that they actually discovered the planet Pluto.
وربما حتى قسم كبير من الناس اللي في محافظة ذيقار لا يعلمون.
Kazim Finja says, perhaps many of the people of the Daikar government do not know that the first airport built on planet Earth all those years ago, before the Christian era, was built here. If you don't believe me, read the book of the great historian Zekiah Sitchin, who was an expert on Sumerian studies. Read the books of Samuel Kramer, or the book written by H.G. Wells about this. History on Earth begins from Sumer. Now, he also said this is the safest place for aircraft to land and take off because some meteorological factors limit an airplane's maneuvering ability. They do not exist in the Daikar airport. Not only above the airport, the skies over Daikar are the safest for planes because there are no meteorological influences here at all. And this is what the Iraqi transport minister says and completely believes. And more importantly, aliens still know that large portions of the population still want to merge, link, unite mentally or spiritually. In a way, for the first time, these people are creating a thing that the Iraqis believe is soft disclosure. You know when people say, I'm opening a shop, but we're going to have a soft opening, and you just open the shop, you don't tell anybody, you just let people discover it, and slowly but surely everybody will get to know. Well, the Iraqi government to this day know for a fact that the first alien starport, forget airport, starport, was in Iraq. And because of the safety of the skies above Iraq, it remains the perfect place for alien craft to land today.
This is Alien Jesus 5 Legacy. If aliens visited the planet before, will they return? Or are they still here, living among us? Maybe the proof has been right in front of us all along. Alien Jesus 5 Legacy.
Alan Robson with you. This is Alien Jesus 5. Now, let me just explain where I happen to be at the moment. We are giving you up-to-date information about what is happening with the general understanding that aliens have visited Earth, and we're proving alien visitation. I've been walking for about a mile from where I parked the car. The temperature at the present moment is about 90 degrees. It is absolutely beautiful. A lot of the buildings in this town, you may have heard the name, but maybe not even had a clue where it was. When you hear Jerry Lee Lewis or the Big Bopper singing, Chantilly lace, pretty face, ponytail, hanging down. Chantilly, that's where I am. I'm in the American state of Virginia. A lot of people about, beautiful day. A lot of buildings that are kind of old school British style, very, very European. And yet, just around this corner, there it is, directly in front of me, the Smithsonian Museum. And why are we here? Well, they've got three dotted across the United States. They've got one in New York, they've got one in Washington, D.C. And yet, I was going to go to one of them. To be honest, I was quite looking forward for part of my holiday to be in New York City. However, the display that I've come to see is here. Free entry today, for some reason, which is very, very good indeed. So, why the Smithsonian and why here? Well, at the present moment, they've got an exhibition on that does exactly what I'm aiming to do. They have artifacts, holograms and pictures of artifacts from all over the world. It's absolute proof that aliens have visited Earth before. It's what I've been trying to do from the very first alien Jesus. The Smithsonian, one of the most revered museum chains on Earth, wouldn't do something like this unless they were absolutely certain themselves of the proof that lies inside. Let's go in, see what they've got. Well, as you can probably tell, we've got to be fairly quiet in here as we're moving around. And to have a museum like the Smithsonian back up everything that you're trying to espouse about alien behavior. In the first case here, I'm just looking at, it's something from the Primorsky Krai area near Vladivostok in Russia. A Russian man found a strange piece of machinery, and the object resembled a piece of tooth wheel and was embedded in a piece of coal that he was using to light a fire. Now, he was freezing, so he wanted to get warm, but he knew there was something about this particular piece of stone. When he got it looked at, it was 300 million years old, and it raised an awful lot of questions too. Questions that a lot of human beings wouldn't start figuring out till the 18 or 1900s. And yet, here is machinery from 300 million years ago. Get your head around that. Not 30,000 years, not 50,000 years. 300 million years ago, there were machines, metal machines on this planet. The next thing, we've just got a picture of this. It's the Guatemala stone head. In the 1930s, explorers found a huge sandstone statue in the middle of the Guatemalan jungle. The face carved in the stone had no facial features of anyone remotely Mayan, nobody Aztec, nobody that lived on that continent, in fact. From the head, it could have been somebody possibly from Britain. Some people have said that it resembles more like Grace Kelly, that spectacular actress from the 1950s. And yet, nobody on that continent would ever have seen anyone of that facial structure. And yet, once again, it was said to have been built almost 20 million years ago. They also have a thing here called the Williams Enigma Lith. And this is actually something quite peculiar, because in 1998 a hiker called John J. Williams noticed there was a strange bit of metal poking up through the dirt. So he started digging it up. And when he cleaned it up, he found that it was essentially a circular stone. However, on the edge of it, there was an electrical plug. It looked like this was a rock that you had to plug in. Well, people have had a look at this and thought, well, it can't possibly be true. And then they took it into one of their machines and they x-rayed it, and they discovered that this amazing stone is 100,000 years old. The rock seems to heat up, and when you attach electrons to it so that the so-called plug on it works, the stone heats up. They used stones like these as a heating mechanism. Now, okay, what I've already given you is impossible to refute, because they're all in museums that have tested them out. Now, the thing that I'm staring at now is one of the key parts of the collection, and it's from the Inca civilization, people who lived in what is now Colombia. and it's an ancient aeroplane. It is a golden figure of an aeroplane. You can see the wide wings, you can see the smaller wings at the back, you can see the tail that was used to move the direction of the craft. These things were found everywhere, and the thing that made them interesting is some of them have propellers, some of them have what resembles jet engines, and those people that have made wooden versions of this say that when they threw them, they flew perfectly. This has all led to speculation that the Incas almost certainly had been in contact with extraterrestrials, people who were able to build jet planes and perhaps even possessed that technology themselves. But this is a beautiful thing, and it's made of absolute solid gold. The other thing they've got here is a very tall statue and a mask, and this is said to be the Al Ubaid archaeological site in Iraq. Now, when Iraq got invaded by, guess who, us, a lot of the museums were destroyed. A lot of these things vanished off into the desert and have yet to surface. So the mask here and the statue of an alien figure, they disappeared now. But they were from a pre-Sumerian time called the Ubaid period. Now that's 5,900 to 4,000 years BC. And they're quite disturbing. I mean, the statue itself, the man has a lizard face, yet he's standing like a man in a similar figuration that you would see mummies laid out in. They're not gods. They're not deities of Egypt. They're a race of lizard people. In front of me is a copy of a thing that's called the Betz sphere. Now, in the middle of an 88-acre woodland, there was a strange fire, and they went to find out what started the fire, and they made a discovery. This silvery sphere, 20 centimeters, 8 inches in diameter, completely smooth, except for a strange elongated triangle symbol. You can see it on the side there. It looks like a NASA gadget or a Soviet spy satellite, something like that. 2 weeks later, the family had this on their dressing table, and the son was strumming a guitar in the same room, and the sphere started reacting to the tune, emitting strange throbbing sounds, and the family's dog went crazy. The Betz family realized the orb had strange properties. It could stop and change direction when you push it across the floor. It seemed to draw power from solar energy, becoming more active on bright days. It started looking like something or someone was controlling it, and it was emitting low-frequency rattling and vibrations, like there was a motor in it. A fascinating thing. There was a media frenzy, you can imagine, to find out more about this amazing sphere. The Betz family wouldn't let them take it away for examination. They said, no, we're keeping it. And soon the sphere took a turn for the worse. It started exhibiting poltergeist-like activity. Doors started slamming shut. Strange music filled the house out of the blue. So the family decided they would find out what the sphere was. The Navy analyzed it and found out it was a perfectly ordinary stainless steel ball. To this day, nobody really knows how it does the things it does, but it does. They emit rattling sounds, they produce music, they roll around. It doesn't explain what this phenomena is, but it does tell you that they have what they have described themselves as a mysterious ghost ball from outer space.
Then Dr. James Albert Harder examined the sphere, and his examination and conclusion sent everybody into a panic, as he said that this orb was an extraterrestrial doomsday device. Dr. Harder believed, based on his X-ray studies, that the two internal spheres are made out of elements far heavier than anything known to science. While the heaviest element yet produced in any atomic reactor here on Earth has an atomic number 105, and the heaviest element occurring naturally on Earth is uranium, with an atomic number 92. Harder claims to have determined that the Bet sphere has atomic numbers higher than 140, and if one were to drill holes into the sphere, he asserted, perhaps the masses would go critical and it would explode like an atomic bomb. And he also said the people should stay as far away from this orb as possible. Then right after Dr. Harder's statement about the sphere, the Betts family and the orb just disappeared. There were no more articles, no more examinations, just nothing. It was like they vanished into a black hole.
Let's walk a little bit further on, because they've taken a close look at, and into this. Oh, this is interesting. Do you know how many times people have come on and they've said, there was only one Messiah? Well, back in the time of Jesus, there was a Messiah about every 3 days. There were hundreds of Messiahs, and an awful lot of them could do the same things that Jesus is attributed to do. You've got... let me just move a little bit further in. We're getting a little bit of noise. They're doing some work at the far side, so we'll go to where this Gilgamesh story can be told. Now, the Epic of Gilgamesh is from 2,600 years ago, because 600 years before the birth of Christ, there was a Messiah who healed the sick and cured the lame and brought the dead back to life and all that kind of thing. And he was considered to be the Son of God. And his name was Gilgamesh. And here we have proof of Gilgamesh, who, of course, revised all things biblical, really, because you can't really consider the Bible to be true if somebody did all of those things 600 years before Christ was born. So who was this guy, Gilgamesh? Well, there in front of me is a picture of him, the king of Uruk and his friend Enkidu. Now, first of all, you will notice that the names are from the region, not Paul, John, Simon, Luke. But this is actually proof that it exists. There's a famous poem that dates back to 2,100 years that tells the entire story. And it's on a tablet, and that tablet has been replicated. And it was discovered in a clear tablet, the Epic of Gilgamesh. And it's in the History Museum in Iraq. They made a deal with a smuggler to buy a set of 80 to 90 clay tablets, and this was one of them. Absolute proof that the man existed, absolute proof that his story was that he healed the sick, cured the lame, he turned water into wine. Do you get where I'm coming from here? This is the entire story of Jesus, just told by Gilgamesh, 600 years BC. Now, none of the people around the year 2000 wrote about Jesus at all. Now, even if you're not a person of any stature you got wrote about back then, Jewish people wrote everything down, but there was no Jesus. In Jewish writings, they tell everything about Gilgamesh, how they killed the bull of heaven and fed the poor, and how they went out into the desert and they fed, he only had a few fish and a couple of loaves, and yet they ended up feeding 30,000 people. They've even got pictures and statues that in the catalogue here of Gilgamesh. He was based around Soleimani, which is pretty much about 50 miles from the Iranian border into Iraq. And this is absolute proof that he was the Messiah, or they said he was the Messiah. Now, the fact that they can prove that he existed for real puts him head and shoulders above Jesus, because there's no proof whatsoever that he ever existed, except a single wanted poster, and that mentions a man called Jesus. None of the disciples are ever mentioned anywhere at all. because those names were made up because they're British names. This is Alan Robson for Alien Jesus in the Smithsonian Museum here in Chantilly in the heart of Virginia, USA.
Alien Jesus 5 Legacy. The greatest mystery of all time exposed.
Now, if you're a fan of Star Wars, and it's hard not to be, depending, of course, which 3 movies that you rate, because it seems everybody has a favourite 3, whether it was the originals or the thing made before that, or the thing made after. It's complex being a Star Wars fan now. However, science fiction is quite often based on reality. Some say it's based on guesswork at first, and then reality comes to pass. But in the case of Star Wars, maybe it affected people all over the world because we felt that it was closer to the truth. In other words, these kind of things have happened before, and that we've seen it, or felt it, or we've been there. Is there on some planet a lightsaber? Or maybe a TIE fighter? Is there the surface of a planet that looks like Jakku in the Star Wars desert? A variety of weird and exotic planets, worlds, galaxies. And maybe there are planets and galaxies just like that. Jungle planets, ice planets. You know, you hear about Tatooine's 2 suns. They're not purely science fiction. NASA scientists, using the Kepler Space Telescope, have identified a planet with a binary star system. They've got 2 moons. We know that Saturn have got a number of moons and suns. And let's look at some of the technology that we have back-engineered. We wouldn't have mobile phones. We wouldn't have the new iPhones if we hadn't gained alien technology and worked backwards to see how it exists. The most famous weapon in film history, Star Wars lightsaber.
The circle is now complete. When I left you, I was but the learner. Now I am the master.
Only a master of evil, Darth.
Now you see, there's a bit of trouble trying to reproduce this kind of thing, and the problem is light particles, photons. They don't have any mass, so they can't interact. If 2 laser beams that were swords passed through each other, in real life it would have no effect. So could they recreate this and yet somehow form them into a kind of molecule? Then we would be getting a little bit closer to lightsaber technology, and we are not there yet. Although we do have laser technology, that already exists, and it's used on the American warship, the USS Ponce. And the physics behind it are simple. Light from the laser diodes are pumped through a thin filter and reflected back and forth through a heavy metal fiber core. And it can bring down drones, it can set inflatables alight, it can cut through metal if you use the right type of laser. Now, TIE fighters, you see these in Star Wars all the time, zipping through the skies. Now, the drive of something like the Imperial fighter ship, we've been using that since 2003. Wasn't because we found the technology on an alien craft and back-engineered that too. The fighter uses solar-powered engines, and it needs 38.5 hours worth of solar power to accelerate to 100 kilometers an hour. But its endurance is unbeatable thanks to an ion thruster. It can reach very, very high speeds. And NASA have this technology, and they're increasing the power and the speed. So that TIE fighter could be a reality if they chose to make one, and make one look the way that it does in Star Wars. Because the technology of the actual craft is sound. It's believed that they'll not do that because modern spacecraft, if we're going to compete with the aliens that are out there, would need to have deflector shields. And the TIE fighter at this moment doesn't have such a thing. You know, they talk about the Force, and how many times have I talked about energies on Earth, energies giving people power. But the true sign of intelligence isn't knowledge. It's sheer imagination. When George Lucas decided he was going to set off on the biggest project of his life 40-odd years ago, he may have had that quote in mind. It was Albert Einstein who coined it. And since then, using imagination and using back technology, they've created many of the things that have already appeared in some of the Star Wars films. To find a craft that can travel across a galaxy at high speed and miss all of the rocks and meteors and planets in the way can be easily done now on any modern computer. The computers that you have in your iPhone could achieve something like that. Also, the physics behind all of the machines that you see are based on things that we now have an understanding of. The fastest ships in the galaxy. And if you look now, do you remember in Star Wars where Luke Skywalker had his arm cut off? Do you remember that moment?
There is no escape. Don't make me destroy you.
Well, who would have thought all those years ago that you could build a prosthetic arm, put it back on, use fake skin to make it look identical to the original? Now, we're not there yet. However, we're not far from it. Prosthetic arms are being made all of the time, and they're getting better and more lifelike and less embarrassing. At the very beginning, it was very obvious. You know, people carried a huge hook on their arm, or they'd walk around with a wooden leg, for heaven's sake, back in the day. And yet now, with cybernetic prosthesis, the technology is on the cusp. Within the next 15 to 20 years, people will have fake arms and fake legs that look like the real thing and feel like the real thing.
Alien Jesus 5 Legacy. Roswell, the story they tried to cover up 70 years on.
I was instructed by Colonel Blanchard to put out a press release which in effect stated that we had in our possession a flying saucer. In essence, it said that we have in our possession a flying disc. It was picked up on a ranch, and I can't remember if I said northwest of Roswell, brought into town by Mac Brazel, the ranch foreman, and the material was flown to higher headquarters, 8th Air Force, General Ramey.
This is Alien Jesus 5 Legacy on Nightowls.
Now, for those of you that have been lucky enough to go to any of a few theme parks around the world that have Star Wars rides, or they train you to be a young Jedi, you'd be used to seeing their craft flying off in their various films to planets that we've never heard of. Well, have you heard about the mystery of Planet X?
Nibiru, a.k.a. Planet X, and referred to by the Vatican as Wormwood, has a mass that is 3 to 5 times the mass of Jupiter. Its composition is cesium, iron oxide, iron, oxygen, and ozone. It consists of 7 planets and moons that orbit it, and innumerable asteroids. Its existence is known by all of the major governments of the world, and they are prepared.
Experts believe that a mysterious 9th planet was to blame for wiping out the dinosaurs. You know, we've heard a lot of people say, no, it was a huge meteorite from space. It landed, knocked the Earth, and tilted it slightly and completely covered the Earth in ice, killing everything thereupon. Well, in the last few weeks, there have been more people coming forward with evidence about Planet 9. And since then, scientists looking for signs to confirm it, they have discovered that their 30-year-old theory about mass extinction is resurfacing. Now, this giant hidden planet in our own galaxy, sitting on the edge of our solar system, was 10 times bigger than the Earth, gaseous, similar to the planets Uranus and Neptune. And Dr. Daniel Whitmire, a retired professor of astrophysics and no mug, has said that he believes that this planet triggers meteorite and comet showers even now. As Planet X goes around the sun, its tilted orbit slowly rotates, and when it passes through the Kuiper belt of comets, which is once every 27 million years, this orbit causes the comets to be knocked. Instead of going out of the galaxy, it's almost like hitting them with a baseball bat. But instead of firing them out of the solar system, they fire the comets back in, where all of the planets are, including ourselves. So, Whitmire and his colleague John Matese first published research on this back in '85, and everybody said, you're making it up, it can't be true. And yet, as the years go by, more people see this as exactly the only possible way that comets can be forced back in when they'll seem to be heading out. Otherwise, there's no explanation to the regular comet showers that change direction from going north to south or east to west to completely turning around and going in completely the opposite direction. And these comet showers, certainly powerful enough to travel towards Earth's orbit and even strike the planet and causing mass extinctions. Dr. Whitmire published this in the University of Louisiana. So Planet X, a viable theory to the end of the dinosaurs, because it rotates slowly, it fires comets every 27 million years, and could, whenever the next 27 million years is up, and who knows when that will be, maybe do it again. Instead of calling it Planet X, now in the science community, they call it Planet 9. And Professor Mike Brown from Caltech has discovered a giant hidden planet sitting on the edge of our galaxy. This was officially discovered on March the 24th, 2016. And Whitmire, all those years ago, who speculated on it, was found to be true. This planet is much closer to the sun and thus only takes 15,000 years to go around it. The evidence for Planet 9 says nothing other than there's a huge planet there right on the edge of our solar system that impacts on the planets therein. But if ever we were looking for a reason, remembering that our gravity usually takes comets away from Earth, they don't suck them in. So what could happen to give them the power to burst through our gravity and make them hit the planet with such force that it completely changes the whole weather cycle. Planet 9 is that answer.
Back in the 1950s, most people aren't aware of it, but there was a scientific storm in America all through the late 50s about this thing out there in space, because the astronomers were all watching it, and that was back when they weren't afraid to talk about it. It was in the science magazines. I mean, I had a subscription to, like, Popular Science, and hell, it was on the front cover of the magazine one day in, like, 1961. And I was really excited when I saw it, because here's this giant red planet on the horizon of the California coast, and a humongous tidal wave coming in towards the coast, and having grew up in the mountains of the Sierras, and this thing in the magazine, it said this tidal wave coming in was going to be at least 3 miles high, and I went in and showed it to everybody in the house, and they laughed, and they said, look, it says right here, there's nothing to worry about. It won't be here for another 50 years. Hey, guess what? That 50 years has came and gone. And this baby's out there in the sky. They've been watching it. I watched it. And I can tell you, this thing has got so much trash coming around it. You know how we live in a solar system? We've got 9 planets and a big sun. This thing has got 7 planets and its own sun.
Now, NASA are saying it's too early to confirm that Planet 9 exists, but they say, we know, we've seen, we've looked at all of the evidence. However, they have to start the process to lead to the exciting result of having it named as the 9th planet in our galaxy. He said there's been lots of predictions, and yet this is what NASA says. This sounds like the reason the dinosaurs ended. Now, apparently, throughout history, if we're going to look at all of the facts, this is not guesswork, if we look at the facts, 5 times in the past, the majority of the world's life has been snuffed out. Mass extinctions. Now, it's presumed that all of those mass extinctions came from giant meteor strikes. First, there was the end Ordovician mass extinction around 440 million years ago. Now, this is proven by the rocks and the geology that we have found. So we know that Earth's been going a lot longer than many religions claim. This was probably the second most severe. Virtually all life was in the sea at the time, and 85% of all of the creatures living in the sea died. Then there was the Devonian mass extinction, 375 to 359 million years ago. Massive environmental changes caused a drawn-out extinction that wiped out all major fish groups, stopped coral reefs forming for over 100 million years. Then there's the end Permian mass extinction. They call this the Great Dying. The largest extinction event, the one that affected the Earth's ecology, that took place 252 million years ago. 97% of all of the species living on Earth, 97%, disappeared forever, except for their fossil records, except for the bones that we found of them. Since then, there have been 2 more. The end Triassic mass extinction. Dinosaurs first appeared in the early Triassic, but large amphibians and mammal-like reptiles were the dominant land animals. The rapid mass extinction that occurred 201 million years ago changed that. And then the last one, the end Cretaceous mass extinction, that was only 65 million years ago. And it's blamed, that's the one blamed for the end of the dinosaurs. All of these can be completely proven 100%, even though 2 or 3 religions believe that none of that happened. Although they got the rocks, they've got the paleontological record to deal with that. They know exactly what happened. If and when Planet 9 is finally allowed to become the 9th planet, we will then know with a great amount of certainty what killed the dinosaurs and what made Earth the planet we are fortunate to have to this day.
I had a radar hit and it was swinging. It looked like 30 knots. There was something there. It looked like it didn't look like a bird. It looked like, no kidding, a rock to me. I kid you negative. I have no idea what it was, but basically just heads up, try to stay away from 17,000, keep your nugget on a sole. I have no idea what it was. I'm going to use my radar to see if I can pick this object up again. I picked it up twice. The first time I picked it up, my radar broke lock, so I thought it was some kind of bad lock or potential chaff.
Now, there's an extraordinary claim that Turkish airline pilots saw a UFO where MS-804 vanished just an hour before it crashed. And it's appeared on one of Turkey's biggest news outlets. Two pilots claim they saw the strange green light craft pass by their jet above Istanbul. And their plane was approaching Ataturk Airport from Bodrum at 11:30 at night. An hour later, the Egypt Air flight crashed 500 miles away in the Mediterranean. Now, mystery surrounds what caused the aircraft to crash, killing 66 people on board. And yet, two Turkish airline pilots are fairly sure of what they saw, and they know that roughly traveling at the speed that the UFO was traveling, if it stayed on the same coordinates, it would cut across directly where the Egypt Air flight was to be.
Up northwest of Detroit, did you see that light? Yeah. Well, that's where I saw it, a real bright white light, sometimes flickered underneath the clouds. This is where I saw it.
Air Shuttle 5959, is that traffic that you saw earlier? Do you see him out there any longer?
Yeah, Air Shuttle 5959, and that's affirmative, and it's a light that kind of goes dim and it gets bright. I don't know if we'll get closer to it or what, but it looks like a rotating light around it, like a frisbee type thing that's going around it. So,
Lasava 3179, do you see the same thing?
Sir, I saw it coming out of Detroit. I wondered, all I saw was just a couple real bright flashes of light, and it almost looked like lightning, and it caught my eye, and then I kept watching it, and then it looked a little bit less bright, but it looked like it was underneath the cloud deck to me, and this was just as we were coming out of Detroit.
Okay, and can you get an altitude on it at all?
The light that I saw was just like maybe, I don't know, 25 miles northwest of Detroit. Is that what you're referring to, or are you talking about the light that's at our 12 o'clock now, about 10 miles?
Any kind of target out near 12 o'clock?
Oh, we got some kind of white light out there at 12 o'clock, and the captain says it's pulsating.
Metro 261.
Looks like oncoming traffic, but it's just sitting about the same place that it's been the whole, for about 10 or 15 minutes we've been watching it.
Yeah, the Air Shuttle 59, it looks like it's almost over Saginaw from our position. Okay, Air Shuttle 5959, contact Saginaw, approach control 126.45. I appreciate the information.
3179, that target looks like it's below us, so I would guesstimate maybe 10,000 feet.
Around 10,000 feet. Would you think it might be like a reflection, maybe perhaps off a beacon, that for some reason it's just one of those weird things, natural phenomena, that you're getting a reflection? Because I got nothing out there.
I don't know. I mean, we can see a clear, relatively solid cloud deck below us, and this is definitely a distinct whitish, they're looking a little red and greenish light sort of pulsating, and it is consonant. It's not a beacon. And Cleveland, Air Shuttle 5959.
Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, hey, just to keep you advised, we're descending to 4,000 feet right now, and as we descended through 10,000 feet, that object is above us right now. It is not on the ground. It's about 10,000 feet.
Okay, sir, we're checking on it right now.
I'll keep it right. I tell you what, that is weird. It's just sitting there pulsating.
The General Directorate of State Airports Authority said that it did find something on its radar that could be linked to what the Turkish pilots had described. And the spotting of a UFO comes as the mystery about the Egypt Air plane crash deepens. Claims the pilots spoke about an emergency descent aimed at putting out some kind of fire. Well, what would cause a plane like that to burn? Could it be direct contact with a UFO? Could the UFO have tried to shoot it down? And if the UFO hit it, did the UFO go down too? Aviation sources in Paris have now said that he contacted the Egyptian air traffic controllers to say they were going to make an emergency landing because there was smoke filling the plane. There was a lengthy conversation, several minutes long, and Captain Shuker and the controllers, it amounted to a distress call. However, the claims last night were then strangely denied by Egypt Air. And a spokesman said, claims made by the French TV station and Istanbul are not true. The pilot did not contact Egypt Air controls before the incident. Then a rapid descent and 66 lives lost. Maybe unnecessarily. However, did a UFO go down too?
Breaking news.
Welcome back, everyone. We continue our breaking news coverage of the disappearance of MS-804, that Egypt Air flight that disappeared from Paris en route to Cairo. We want to bring you up to speed on exactly what we know right now. Egyptian military search and rescue teams have arrived at a specific search location to look for that missing jetliner. Officials from the airline and Egypt's Civil Aviation Authority tell Reuters the plane probably crashed in the sea.
Now, every now and then people say, well, surely if aliens had been on Earth before, there would be proof in all directions. And there is, in all directions. And we're discovering it all the time. And then we're trying to rationalize it so we don't get too scared of the fact that aliens have visited this planet since long before we were even created as human beings. Scientists in July 2016 discovered the remains in Russia of an alien-shaped skull from 2,000 years ago. A lot of people say this is proof, as if we needed it, that mankind was visited by extraterrestrials far more recently, maybe 2,000 years ago. They found remains of an ancient woman with an elongated skull, just like we see pictures of greys. When pictures of the humanoid figure with the egg-shaped skull were published, UFO watchers rushed to insist it was proof of alien visitation. Scientists, however, claimed the discovered remains found in Akhaim in central Russia's Chelyabinsk Oblast region were 2,000 years old. They could not tell whether the body was human or alien. Archaeological Museum head Maria Makurova analyzed the remains, said her skull was elongated because the tribe did so by tying up the heads of their children with rope. It was clearly a tradition of the tribe. But when she said that, she was guessing. She didn't know that this was the case for sure. However, they say that women that lived back then used to copy the shape of the skull from people based in legend. Now, if their legend told the people with a skull this shape, where did that legend come from? And was it directly from the people that came from the stars? Because apart from the peculiar skeleton, archaeologists discovered iron knives, ceramic walls, beads, fragments of jugs, and things that people of that time certainly would not have had the sophistication to be able to create. On the area of that burial, they also found a well-preserved skeleton of a nomad with an elongated skull, the remains of two other men with elongated skulls. All of the discoveries remaining belonging to the Sarmatians, an ancient tribe that moved into the territory of modern Ukraine, Kazakhstan, and southern Russia. And it's believed that the Sarmatians tied their skulls down from a very, very young age so they could look like the people who came from the stars, who taught them all of these highly sophisticated ways of doing things the rest of humanity wouldn't be able to understand for another 1,500 to 2,000 years.
We don't want to know what that is. Craft.
Oh my God! It is! It's spinning.
I see it.
On a clip captured on a telephone, panicked residents filming a UFO that appeared over Ohio after some particularly strange dark clouds. The footage shows a UFO moving slowly and silently through the sky. The witness tells everybody how the sky was bright, then suddenly it turned dark with swirling black clouds, and then from the mixture of clouds came the craft.
Oh my God!
A UFO enthusiast described the object as solid with circuitry on its top. Now, this bizarre clip was captured in Cleveland, Ohio, by two people who can be heard reacting in disbelief as this black, disc-shaped object spins above them. The video was taken at 9:45 at night, and the craft was captured in a series of photographs taken by another witness who was in the same vicinity at roughly the same time. The footage was sent to a UFO specialist who presents a YouTube channel, Secure Team 10, and he said he was keen to post the clip because the sighting was sent to him from two sources who both claimed to have seen the same object from two different parts of that state. He said, as you are seeing this thing, you can tell it's not a balloon, it's not a plane, and it is under control. Who is controlling it, and where did it come from? We have the classic disc or saucer shape in a three-dimensional structure. It looks hard, flat on top, with a rigid outer ring, and we can see the bottom of the object poking out. He said he was particularly interested by the top that seems to show some circuitry, a kind of circuit board. And the video concludes with Taylor stating, "This is a solid craft without engines or blades." And a lot of people said, well, could it be a drone? And he discredits that. Out of hand. UFO experts that have seen this have described the footage as amazing, the proof we need to tell us all that they are out there and they're watching us.
Oh my God! It is! It's spinning!
I see it.
Oh my God!
The greatest mystery of all time exposed. This is Alien Jesus 5 Legacy.
Alan Robson with you for Alien Jesus. I am on the land belonging to Area 51. This is a place, I'm going to tell you some things that you never knew about this place. I'm in Dreamland. Dreamland is the code name for Area 51. Top secret military base. It's about 87 miles, judging by my car. I've travelled from Las Vegas, Nevada. It's also known by some people as Groom Lake. If they don't want to mention Area 51, they'll say there's been an incident at Groom Lake, and everybody knows what it's all about. I'm actually walking right now. I don't know whether you can tell. It's a dry lake bed that the base is sitting on. The base is 6 miles wide. It's 10 miles long. It added 85,000 acres to it. Do you realise how many 85,000 acres is? Just to surround the base and to make sure that observers are kept at a distance. Now, somewhere beyond the fence that is just behind me, because I'm technically on Area 51 land at the moment, is that huge US base. Considered so sensitive that anybody that works at this place has to take a special oath of secrecy. Civilian contractors and others who work at the base are flown in every morning. They're not allowed to stay on the property, with structures built deep into the desert floor. Buildings are said to go down up to 40 stories below ground. Think 40 stories below ground. That's deeper than most conventional mines. The perimeter of the base, covered with ground sensors and listening devices to detect the smallest intrusion. Really? They haven't yet. I got a sneaky suspicion they might. I mean, the demeanour of the guys that moved me on, and I was just on the highway, I mean, literally just off the highway. Any crap here, it has to be said. I noticed that the main area of fencing is heavily patrolled by armed guards. They've got a blazer on, marked Wackenhut Corporation. I've never heard of them, but apparently there must be some serious kind of security company. And from the look of them, if you disagree with what they say, they kill you. They bury you in the desert. Now, if there's nothing to hide, why that degree of concern? If you go onto the board of that security company, you'll find that it's full of people who are big players in the intelligence community. Former CIA directors, lots of them. Former defense directors, former FBI directors, Secret Service directors. And that's just people. William Casey died recently, but he was on the board, the big famous CIA director. So why the big deal? I'm just going to keep walking till I get stopped here. If I do get stopped, well, you'll hear about it. I'm on their property, but as I say, they've got miles before there is anything, or unless I stumble upon it. What I'm staring at the present moment is scrubland. There are little tiny areas of trees, and you can probably hear in the distance the birds in those areas of trees. However, out in the open, nobody to be seen. It was first opened, this whole place, in 1955 as a testing facility for the U-2 spy planes that Lockheed were developing. It's since become a symbol for US government alien and UFO cover-up. It's supposedly where the recovered alien spacecraft are tested and reverse engineered. Now, to my right-hand side, about 400, 500 yards, is an area that's marked S4. It's a parcel of land where we're told it opens out to underground to where the most secret research takes place. I'm going to see if I can get a little bit further. However, meanwhile, we've got something rather interesting for you to hear.
Roswell, the story they tried to cover up 70 years on.
I got a phone call. Well, I got a number of phone calls, but the one that really got my attention was purportedly from the Pentagon. There was a young lady on the line saying, Colonel so-and-so, this is the Pentagon calling. And this was in a few minutes of it going out on the wire. And the voice on the line says, who is this? I tell him. He said, you put that story on the air about the flying saucers? And I mean, his voice was, you know, the type that really conveys menace and power. And I said, yes, I did. And he says, you're going to get in a lot of trouble for this, or made some threatening comment. And I said, look, I'm a civilian. You can't talk to me this way. You can't treat me this way. You can't tell me what to do in stories I put on the air. And he says, I'll show you what I can do. And bang, hung up the phone.
I got a call from Washington from one of the offices of one of the senators saying, look, if you put out any stories on this thing, you're going to lose your license. And it's not going to be over a period of time. It's going to be the same day that we tell you that you're off the air.
For 30 years, the Roswell crash remained a dark secret. This story wasn't talked about until 1978.
I was amazed at what I saw. The amount of debris that was scattered over such an area. It took me a while to realize that there's something strange about it. But the more I saw the fragments, the more I realized that it wasn't anything that I was acquainted with. I proved by trying to burn it, it wouldn't burn. I tried to break it, it would not break. If it was something of ours, I'm sure there would be no reason to keep it under cover that long. It's an alien spacecraft. There's another reason why it would not ever been owned by anybody here until they found out more about it. I sense that there was a cover-up someplace about this whole matter.
Alien Jesus 5, legacy.
Still, every day when we talk about things like this, people again, we want proof, we want proof, we want proof. We keep giving people more proof of this than for any religious belief on the planet. For they have no proof, pretty much. Nothing other than a book written by people long years after. But we can give you proof because it's out there. Alien bases on Earth. What have they got? There have been many claims of the aliens. They're under our feet. They're everywhere. They're in Europe. At one time, people thought they were at Porton Down, a military base in Wiltshire, one of the most active underground alien bases in the world. Wiltshire getting crop circles and burnings, animals being ripped on a regular basis. Could it be that Porton Down, where many people from the northeast served during World War II, could things have been going on directly under their feet without them knowing? A large iron plate was discovered by a labourer in a field in Staffordshire. The hatch was oval with a huge iron ring mounted on it. The plate served as a closed gate, and when they pulled it open, it was connected to an underground alien base. No ladders down, no lift, no way of getting down there. Just a hole in the ground in Staffordshire that was 3, 4, 5, 6 miles deep. He dropped something down that hole and waited without any sound at all. There are photographs of that hole that exist to this day. In Canada, in one of the iron mines in Newfoundland, it was shut down because there was a number of strange events that happened to the mine. It was dug deeper than other mines in that area, and eyewitnesses say that they saw beings of unusual shape and structure down below them in the tunnels that opened up once you got down there. The things that happened inside that mine compelled people to believe it was serving as an underground alien base. Then there's the Valley of the Headless Man, or the Nahanni Valley in Canada. It's a mysterious-looking bit of land, as people entering the valley are mostly found dead with their heads severed brutally. Multiple incidences have caused fear in the minds of locals that they are being captured by a group of hostile aliens that cause a vicious death to anyone who enters their area. Over the last 800 years, more than 200 people have been found there, decapitated, strangely, without any major police activity or investigation. Do they already know who's doing it? Russia has their own version of Roswell. It's called the Zitka Base. It's a hub of different alien operations that are being carried out to this day by anti-terrestrial beings. The base is supposed to serve as a rocket launch facility, but the reality is that all sorts of secret research is being carried out by aliens underneath the snows. And if you look down from space on Google Earth at the Zitka Base, you will see it is very, very busy indeed. And some people have narrowed Google Earth down to pick up figures that are 7 and 8 foot tall, moving amongst ordinary humans.
June 19th, 1948, early evening. According to reports, Kapustin Yar's air traffic controller sees a strange object appear on his radar screen. At the exact same moment, a MiG pilot about 10 kilometers downrange from the base sees a large silver cigar-shaped UFO directly in front of him. He radios back to the base that he's being blinded by a bright light. It is believed that under direct orders from Soviet Air Force Commander-in-Chief Zygarov, the pilot engaged the UFO for almost 3 minutes before launching a missile that was finally able to bring the object down. But unlike Roswell, this crash never made the papers.
What about mainland America? Surely somewhere as big as that's got to have something. Well, if Hopi Native American Indian legends are to be believed, the caves near the confluence of the Little Colorado and Colorado River used to be the underground homes of the Ant people, and they were friendly with local humans, having traveled down from the stars. Some of these caves have been explored to discover Central American, Egyptian, and Oriental artifacts. Artifacts that you can only get from those countries. But not now. These are artifacts from almost 2,000 years ago. How did they get there into that tunnel? How could drawings of these people be made when you couldn't travel back in the day? Many people believe this area has clearly served as a secret underground alien base. It's not the only one. Of course, you've got Roswell, and beneath Mount Shasta in California, it leads to an underground alien base. The fact that California is one of those states that has maximum UFO sightings makes it easy to believe the UFOs come to meet up with the aliens stationed at the underground base next to Mount Shasta. And if you have a look at the mountains, if you happen to be walking past the mountains, you will see huge metal doors on the base of the mountain. Why are those doors closed? Why can't people go in if there are tunnels there? Then, another underground city next to Mount Lassen in California's Tehama County. The residents of Manton, the city at the base of the mountain, have known about this underground base for hundreds and hundreds of years, and they say they have seen a hub of alien visitors over the years. But the most famous underground alien base is the Dulce base in New Mexico. This underground base has got multiple layers, each layer being the home of horrific genetic experiments on humans and other forms of life on Earth. They believe that a population of at least 18,000 aliens inhabit the Dulce base. And then, of course, we can't mention all of these without mentioning Roswell, Area 51, where captured aliens from that 1947 Roswell UFO are kept and studied. And it is real. It is one of the most discussed and most hyped alien bases. It's believed that alien spacecrafts and corpses are studied there, and the reverse engineering is conducted. And yet, around the world as we travel, there is one place that is the biggest alien base from back in the day, with markings inside that prove aliens have visited. Tony and I went to Istanbul, and when we were there, we traveled far, far out into the desert, into an area that was quite dangerous, to visit one of the biggest underground cities and alien bases on planet Earth. And we'll be telling you all about that from that city after the break.
Alien Jesus 5 Legacy. This is Alien Jesus 5 Legacy on Nightowls.
Bordered on the north by the Black Sea and by the Taurus Mountains to the south lies Cappadocia in central Turkey. Here, wind and water have sculpted strange shapes out of the soft volcanic rock. Rock which ancient peoples once turned into small primitive dwellings. In more recent years, the site has seen the construction of more modern structures. But in 1963, a simple home renovation in the town of Derinkuyu led to an extraordinary discovery when a cave wall was opened, revealing a passageway to an underground city thousands of years old and more than 280 feet deep.
I'm going to send you back in time. Do you remember when we visited Turkey? We had a week broadcasting live from Istanbul. And when we were there, we visited something that is inexplicable to any skeptic. Derinkuyu Underground City in Cappadocia. What a time we had. Here's a clip. The present moment, I've just moved inside the Derinkuyu Underground City in Cappadocia, Turkey. An ancient, multi-level underground city extending to a depth of almost 60 meters, and yet it spreads over acres, hundreds of square acres in all directions. Big enough to shelter between 20 and 30,000 people, together with their livestock and food stores. And yet, more recently, it's been thought of as the place, the impossible place. A place built at a time when there were no human beings on planet Earth. Now you walk down long passages like this one, and you see it as you go. It's kind of sandy, dusty, and when you put your foot down in it, just a cloud of dust. Don't know whether you can hear it. It doesn't sound like the stone that it is, because it's soft stone. And the walls, if you rub the walls, once again you get a fine film, a cloud of red dust. Oh, don't want to do too much of that. It was open to the visitors. Anybody that wanted to come round about 1969 when it was rediscovered. And yet, half of the city is still inaccessible. You're not able to get there. Each floor could be closed off with these huge, heavy doors. Massively, massively heavy doors that you just physically, they're made of stone, and you really can't get past them. They're big, heavy stone doors, and they're circular. And what they actually do is they open by turning in onto the corridor and filling the whole corridor, so nobody can get past. As I say, there used to be things down here like oil presses, stables, cellars, storage rooms, rooms that they thought were maybe to do with religion, but nobody was quite sure. And unique to the Derinkuyu complex, on the second floor, a huge spacious room with a barrel-vaulted ceiling. Some people say that it could well have been used in the past as a school, and obviously theologians of various religious ilks have said, well, it was obviously a Muslim school, it was obviously a Christian school, it was obviously a da-da-da-da-da. There's no proof it was a school at all, but it's an enormous room. It looks like a planning room. The nearest thing it looks like to me is the kind of room that Churchill had beneath London during World War II, a room where you had small side rooms where you could sleep. You had other rooms where you could talk about stuff. And between the third and fourth levels, there's a vertical staircase. Now, this is not stairs that go off to the side. They go straight up, and you have to climb them. And the steps in between each stair is further than it's comfortable for a human to step. The gaps in between were made for people sized 7 and 8 feet tall. Who built this place? Who built it? They're carved out of unique geological formations. They may well have been used as hiding places during times of raids over the years. Many of those locations are now kind of archaeological tourist attractions. They remain genuinely and generally unoccupied. In excess of 200 underground cities containing a minimum of 2 levels have been discovered in the area between Kayseri and Nevşehir. 40 of them contain a minimum of 3 levels down into the earth. The cities of Kaymakli and Derinkuyu are the two best examples of habitable underground structures. There's others ticking around, and as I look, you can see rooms carved out of it, and with, instead of glass windows there, just an opening so you can see into the next room. But again, the question still remains. If human beings didn't build this, who did? And yet, the one thing that I noticed on the way in to this temple, and you know we went to a previous temple, the two things they have in common is the outside has been pretty much utterly destroyed. There's marks of devastation where huge explosions almost of a volcanic size have taken place. And this adds fuel to the fact that maybe those two gods came together. Aliens who both wanted what the earth had to offer. And they fought one another, not on the ground, but in the sky. And the only place where these aliens could be safe, where maybe they are now, dotted across planet Earth, below the ground, in the crust, in the surface of our planet. Yet remember two things. The Bible, the Quran, and the Talmud, three of the oldest holy books, all say that people from the stars bred with man. So first of all, we are the aliens. Secondly, alien cultures fought over this place. This part of the world had aliens swooping in crafts far before we were ever able to do that, far before we were on the planet, to try and wipe each other out using technology of the sort we have now. But we weren't even on the planet to throw a stick, to chuck a stone back then. We hadn't even been born. So just remember, when you hear the next story of, oh, well, we were told that 400,000 years ago there was no humans on the planet, but they've just found footprints in a riverbed, or they've just found tools made that only a human hand could make. It's quite spooky walking along the corridors and not being able to hear your footprints, and to see shadows on the walls and little things carved into rocks that look like star systems. Star systems that no man could ever possibly know about. If you look outside, the one thing that all of these places have in common is something has tried to destroy the surface of the planet. Something from above, carrying great power, has tried to wipe these places out. Yet when you're inside them, you must have felt absolutely safe. 50 meters from the surface. What could hurt you? Even using modern weapons today, you'd feel pretty safe from almost every kind of weapon. And yet, this could be the place where the very first space battle took place. Because nothing can move the kind of like 60, 70, 80 tons of rock and earth. Nobody on the planet had the capability to build it, even if they were on the planet at the time, and they weren't. So I am now, maybe for the first time properly in my life, I'm in a building made by spacemen. There's no other explanation for it. It sounds incredibly far-fetched, and yet there's no other way it could possibly be. And as you go, you can kind of look down. I'm standing beside that staircase, and the staircase goes down almost 50 meters, 45 meters. And I couldn't climb up this. The first step is about 4 foot off the ground. Now think, how are you going to get your foot on that 4 foot? If you're a ballet dancer, you may be able to do it. But then the next one's 8 foot off the ground. How tall do you have to be able to walk upstairs of this sort? It's impossible.
Alien Jesus 5 Legacy. Alien Jesus 5.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army. Army officers say the missile, found sometime last week, has been inspected at Roswell, New Mexico, and sent to Wright Field, Ohio, for further inspection. Late this afternoon, a bulletin from New Mexico suggested that the widely publicized mystery of the flying saucers may soon be solved. Army Air Force officers reported that one of the strange discs had been found and inspected sometime last week. Our correspondents in Los Angeles and Chicago have been in contact with Army officials endeavoring to obtain all possible late information. The Army may be getting to the bottom of all this talk about the so-called flying saucers. As a matter of fact, the 509th Atomic Bomb Group headquarters at Roswell, New Mexico, reports that it has received one of the discs which landed on a ranch outside Roswell. The disc landed at a ranch at Corona, New Mexico, and the rancher turned it over to the Air Force. Rancher W.W. Brizzell was the man who discovered the saucer. Colonel William Blanchard of the Roswell Air Base refuses to give details of what the flying disc looks like. In Fort Worth, Texas, where the object was first sent, Brigadier General Roger Ramey says that it is being shipped by air to the AAF Research Center at Wright Field, Ohio.
Roswell, the story they tried to cover up 70 years on.
General DuBose said that specifically to us, that the balloon explanation that the Air Force offered was a cover story to get the reporters off General Ramey's back. So we have a wide body of testimony that was a cover-up. We have military witnesses saying they were sworn to secrecy.
Everyone who witnessed this historic event was ordered to keep quiet. Why?
And he said, I want you to know you were never there. And I didn't understand what he meant, because I said, yes, I was. And he said, no, you weren't. I said, yes, I was. And he said, can't you get this through your head? You never saw anything. You were not there. You don't know anything. And he said, this is a big desert out here. We can just take you out in the middle of this desert and no one will ever find your bodies. He said, you'll be nothing but bones and nobody will ever know what happened to you. And I told him I would not talk about it.
What could they have been hiding from us for the past 70 years?
Now, I thought the thing we had to do was talk to people from NASA. We've talked to a lot. We're going to have a chat with an astronaut very soon. Somebody that's been there and done that. And is he singing from the NASA songbook? Is he keeping secrets from us? Well, you can judge yourself. However, a second NASA scientist revealed just this year that somebody else is on the moon. Now, a lot of people from NASA have made some fairly shocking claims about the moon. In fact, one of them even published a book said, somebody else is on our moon. Now, the photographs are small in size, the resolution's not great, but they show details of original massive prints. And the man, George Leonard, a NASA scientist, published the identifying code numbers of the photos in his works. They're believed to be real. And yet far more compelling than these photos that show you people building things on the moon are his statements about what was found there, along with his verified NASA credentials. Leonard was not the only one with a credible background trying to warn the world that there was life on the moon and that the photographs had been taken from the Apollo missions where they landed on the moon, but they refused to let other people see those photographs because it changed what the governments wanted ordinary people to believe.
The universe that we live in is much more wondrous, exciting, complex, and far-reaching than we were ever able to know up to this point in time. And the fact we have wondered, were we alone in the universe forever? Only in our period do we really have evidence, no, we're not alone.
My question is, why did NASA erase 40 rolls of film from the Apollo program, the flight to the moon, the flight around the moon, the landings on the moon, the men walking there. And then they wiped out, they erased 40 rolls of film of one of the greatest events in the history of the world. We're talking about probably 7,000 to 8,000 individual frames that were taken on that great step for mankind that some politicians said would be disruptive, socially unacceptable, politically unacceptable. A retired sergeant major who worked for NASA said, "I was never famous for having a lot of patience, but clearly they don't trust their own people with the truth." In Russia, people have similar calls. They have proof also of the moon landing, and they also know that there was a disappearance of film footage from Russian observatories. Also, 400 kilograms of lunar rock that was brought onto the spacecraft on multiple missions between 69 and 72 suddenly disappeared. Where are you going to take 400 kilograms of rock? And Leonard told NASA that he knew, that they knew, about extraterrestrial activity on the moon, and they chose to hide that information. There's lots of books you could read, but start to understand what's really going on, because there is no doubt that we are being visited. The universe that we live in is much more wonderful, much more exciting, incredibly more complex and far-reaching than we'll ever be able to know at this time in our history. We've always wondered if we're alone in the universe, but only now can we say with absolute certainty we are not alone. So with that in mind, let's have a conversation with an astronaut. Now you have to remember, before they are allowed to leave planet Earth in a spacecraft, they have to sign Official Secrets Act, and they are told on their return what they can and can't say. On saying that, I found this guy most amenable and a nice man. But was he telling the absolute truth when we discuss aliens? Judge for yourself.
All the second stage tanks now pressurized. 30 seconds and counting. Astronauts report it feels good. T-minus 25 seconds. 20 seconds and counting. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Now, what we really need right now is a conversation with a former NASA astronaut and maybe somebody who's been ambassador for the Kennedy Space Center Visitor Complex. Been there, watched the rockets take off. Amazing experience, unlike any other. And I've got Brian Duffy on the end of the line. Hello, Brian.
Ellen, great to be with you.
Great to talk to you.
Thanks.
First of all, what's it like getting up there in space? You've been up there 4 times.
Well, it's a nice place, right? So I went back. I couldn't get enough of it, so I kept going back. So, yeah, no, it's a marvelous experience. It's a great place, and they're so happy to be accomplished and do it, and then happy to come home as well. So, Earth's not such a bad place.
No, absolutely. It's always good to get your feet back on the ground. I would imagine, though, everything up there at the very beginning would be fascinating, and we know you've trained for it and you've been weightless and all that, but I would imagine once you're weightless completely for the next 10, however many days, that's a different thing altogether. Nothing would really prepare you for that.
True, but you know what's amazing is when you go the first time, the weightlessness is a bit of a novelty for a day or two.
Right.
But then after that, it's as if you've been weightless your entire life. You've floated your whole life. So it becomes completely normal as sitting in a chair here on the ground.
Did you ever think after the first time that you were up there that you should take like a jar of pickled onions and just fire them up in the air and spend the afternoon chasing them?
We do that a lot with M&Ms. Some things that aren't as messy.
Yeah, not quite sit down, I'll get you. When you are up there, what is the worst part about it?
Actually being away from your family.
Right.
Yeah, you feel very detached from the world. It's a personal feeling. Everyone feels differently, but for me, that's what it was. Saying goodbye to your family was hard, and being there away from them. But you're there doing a job, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Obviously, I went back 3 more times.
Sure. I mean, you were responsible for carrying out a lot of remedial work on the space station, and you were using these amazing robotic arms and really for us, very high-tech technology.
It was very high-tech, and think about the shuttle. It was designed back in the 60s, actually,
right,
or maybe the mid-70s. So we were still using slide rules back then,
right,
to design it. And technology's come a long way over the years. But the vehicle was so capable. It was just the most amazing flying machine ever built by humans.
I also have to ask you, because when anybody drives up to the Kennedy Space Center, the first thing you realize, and it's the first thing that you realize, yet it's obvious when you think about it, you're going to a space center, you got rockets everywhere there. There's rockets everywhere.
Yeah, the good news is the places you can go, they're not going to explode.
But I mean, literally, you're walking through a field of...
Yeah, we actually call it the Rocket Garden.
The Rocket Garden.
We do, yeah, and and if you walk through the Rocket Garden and keep going through the complex, you'll come to a nice, large new building with the space shuttle Atlantis in it, which is an incredible display there. You can get right up close to it. It's the orbiter that I flew on my first mission, so I have a very special attachment to it. And whenever I'm at the Kennedy Space Center, I always go over there and I look and make sure they're keeping my windows clean.
That's lovely. I mean, also, there's a number of simulators that people can go on to essentially follow in your footsteps.
There is. There's I guess you'd call it an exhilarating simulation of a space shuttle launch. That's what it's called, the shuttle launch experience.
Yeah.
And it gives you an idea of what it was like on board and what some of the sites are. So that's fabulous. We're coming up with a new one now. For people that come to the visitors complex, there's something called the astronaut training experience.
Wow.
And that involves Mars. And so
fantastic.
You find yourself using virtual reality. We can bring you to Mars. And
fabulous.
So that'll be a great attraction as well.
No, for sure. I mean, everybody must ask you about UFOs and spacecraft and all the rest of it. You've been up there 4 times. Did you see anything?
I never saw anything that I couldn't explain.
Right.
But I saw some really neat things. In fact, one time we were coming right down the spine of Mexico, so we were going northwest to southeast, and I looked across the Gulf of Mexico over to Florida, to the Kennedy Space Center, actually, and I watched a rocket launch.
Oh, my goodness.
And so it came up to our altitude, and I was glad it was going the other direction.
I may well have been there on the ground, because I was lucky enough to be there when one of the guys took off. And it's otherworldly. It's everybody thinks, well, it's just a rocket taking off. The earth shakes, it's the vibration in the air, I think, that hits you more than anything else. An incredible experience.
It is, and you're realizing that how much energy it takes to get something into space. We start out going 0 miles an hour on our launch pad, and 8.5 minutes later we're going 17,500 miles an hour. It's 8 kilometers per second. And that takes a lot of energy, and what you did is experience it. And so in 2017, folks that do come to the visitor center can, good chance that they'll see a rocket launch while they're there, because there are more than 30 of them happening this year.
My goodness, amazing. And well worth traveling the distance just for that. Got to ask you, though, I'm going to chase these aliens with you, I have to say. You worked with NASA, obviously. NASA keep closing the feed when something happens. Everybody, the world's watching the whole NASA feed, and then all of a sudden somebody will say, hang on, there's a... Then the feed goes down. What's that all about? You're keeping secrets, you guys.
You know, I heard somebody say that just the other day, and I thought, well, maybe if there's something to hide, I guess I'd have to do that. But I'm certainly not aware of anything they'd need to do that on.
You must have talked to people that have seen the bodies of the aliens in Area 51. Come on. You're an astronaut, Brian. You're behind the veil of secrecy.
You know, I'm more of an engineer, so not so much a sci-fi guy.
No, but this is the thing. You probably worked on these spacecraft, reverse engineering, so that next time you go up, you'll be safer.
Okay, you got me. I finally admit it.
But, I mean, there must be talk amongst you guys about this kind of thing, because other astronauts have come out and said, I saw this, I experienced that. Even some of the guys that went on the moon were making claims about stuff that they'd seen up there. Is there not chat between you fellas?
You know, I guess not about that stuff. I don't think I've ever had a conversation with anybody. And, and I've known everybody from, the John Glenn era, all the way to, most of today's astronauts. So
right.
Never had that conversation about anything that unusual.
I find that amazing because NASA people put an announcement out saying they've found 7 more planets where they're fairly sure that there will be life of some kind there. So maybe your next trip, Brian's going to be to find out.
Maybe they'll name one after me.
Yes, we're on our way to Duffy. I wouldn't hold your breath, Bri, frankly.
Yeah, I won't. But I'm happy that they're doing things like finding those exoplanets. Maybe we'll get a better look at them pretty soon when the James Webb Telescope launches, because it's going to be much more powerful even than the Hubble Space Telescope.
And maybe it'll give us some of the answers that we're looking for. Absolutely fantastic. What has been your biggest kick out of all of your trips up there?
The biggest kick, I'm always happy when we're successful with the mission. But actually on my last flight there, rendezvous and docking with something that was already in space. That was pretty amazing. That's something that fulfilled a dream of my childhood.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I mean, Brian, I have to say, having heard your answers about UFOs, we know you've been abducted and probed, and you've obviously been given a script that you have to follow. We understand. And we hope the probing didn't do you too much harm, but we're very, very grateful to talk to you. People who watched Star Trek like 30, 40, 50 years ago, we're already using the mobile phones and that kind of thing, laptops, and this is an amazing addition to it, because we're watching sci-fi to see what the next step's going to be for you fellas.
Well, I guess that puts things out there for people to try to go develop. So they try to develop the technology. Maybe there'll be a teletransporter here one of these days.
Oh, well, in which case I'd be sitting on your knee now, Brian.
Yeah, and they'll beam us both up.
Hey! Fantastic. No, it's been an honor, Brian. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.
Alan, my pleasure. Thank you.
Alien Jesus 5 Legacy.
My interest in UFOs was not very great until 8 years ago. When I was Minister of Defense, of course, I got sighting reports, but I was too busy unifying the Canadian Armed Forces to be able to worry about them. So I wouldn't say I was a skeptic. I wasn't. I was an agnostic. I didn't know whether they were real or whether they weren't. But there was a young man in Ottawa whose name was Pierre Juno, and he started sending me things about the UFO file. One of the things he sent me one day was a book called The Day After Roswell, and I found it absolutely fascinating. While I was reading the book, my nephew said, "What are you reading?" I told him what it was, and he said, "Well, I'm a skeptic." A couple of days later, he phoned and said, I was talking to the general. The general, incidentally, was a former United States Air Force general that he had met in his aviation career. And I told him what you were reading, and he said, every word of it is true and more. I phoned the general. Before I could even say hello and how are you, He said every word is true and more. And he said that there had, in fact, been face-to-face meetings between United States officials and extraterrestrials from other star systems. And with that assurance, I decided to go public and say, for the first time, of anyone of cabinet rank from the G8 group of countries, that UFOs are as real as the airplanes flying over your head, and said it without any restriction whatsoever.
There was an interesting debate on American television recently. You had a priest, you had a rabbi, you had an imam, and you also had half a dozen people who are from NASA. And the discussion in general was, if alien visitation had taken place, is it in keeping with the holy books? And to all of the clergy's surprise, it was absolutely in keeping. However, the one thing they said at the end of the program, well, maybe they have been here, but they've left no sign. Problem is, they've left sign everywhere. We just have to interpret it. For example, 2 alien skulls were discovered in Russia. Now, it's like a scene from an Indiana Jones film. But the Komsomolskaya Pravda, it was called. 2 alien-like skulls were found in the mountains of the Caucasus region of Adygaya. And the 2 skulls belonged to an unknown creature, not human. Now, Anunnaki was probably a secret society belonging to the SS, and rather like Raiders of the Lost Ark. Adolf Hitler sent his people out to try and find religious relics, not so much alien things, but religious relics, so that he could use his Christian beliefs to conquer the world. And he sent members of the SS out looking for the alien skulls. Now, I've seen the skulls. The skulls are very strange looking things, and they certainly are not human, and they're not really the shape of an ape either. And the Germans set out in 1941 to collect all of the religious artifacts that they could, anything that was peculiar, anything that was odd, anything that was different. The Anunnaki, that was the German SS unit that did it, took a look at the skulls, and they weren't sure, could they be a goat, could they be from a bull? They had no idea at all, because most of the people there were not archaeologists. They were scientists of very different types. The interesting thing about where they were found next to a stream that had different vitamins in it, some of which aren't found anywhere else on Earth. To protect the undercover investigations, the skulls were hidden from the Germans, and only when the Nazis left in August 1944, the skulls came out again. Even today, people still talk about unusual events in the area. There was the finding of a giant skeleton, 3 meters in height, that belonged to an unknown race in the Borjomi Canyon. The Russian media believes the mysterious skulls that were found at Mount Bolshoi Chak 2 years earlier by a group of explorers. They say they walked on 2 legs. It was unlike anything known to man. They had very, very deep skulls with large eye sockets, unusually large, with a big sticky out jaw. And even when they compared that with the skull of a bear, it was completely and totally different. And the bear, the only creature from a size point of view that it could have been. Paleontologists in Moscow weren't too excited when they saw the skulls. They merely said that they're unlike anything we've seen. so what? They've been submerged a while. They've been in sand a long time. Maybe they've been deformed. And yet the skulls are in really good condition for the length of time they've been on the planet, because we think the skulls are dated almost 200,000 years ago. So there's one thing that has no proper explanation, and yet they're there. The skulls are there. Almost like, well, we don't know what they are, but come have a look at them.
Reports from Russian newspapers at the time indicated that a briefcase and two alien-like skulls were discovered in the cave systems of the Caucasus region. What is amazing about the briefcase is the insignia which can be found upon its front. It is the emblem of the Ahnenerbe, once the Nazis' most secret of institutions. Founded by Heinrich Himmler in 1935, their mission was to find evidence that the Aryan race had once ruled the entire world. But they also branched into occultism, paranormal research, pseudoscience, and the study of UFOs and weapons development. All due to Himmler's obsession with such things. The strange appearance of the skulls has led to speculation that the Nazis were in contact with aliens. Mr. Melikov was reported as saying the creature is unlike anything known to man. He said among the most mysterious features of the skulls is the absence of a cranial vault or jaws. The eye sockets are also unusually large. He added, even when compared with the skull of a bear, it is hard to think that you do not have in your hands the remains of an alien creature. Paleontologists in Moscow were shown pictures of the skulls. They reportedly dismissed the skulls, saying they could have been exposed to sand for long periods of time, which could have altered their shape. Russian newspaper reports have also recorded other German discoveries in the area, including last summer when Elbrus hunters found a second suitcase with the Ahnenerbe logo. It is thought to have belonged to the huntsman of the German division, Edelweiss, and was found along with a ring showing a soldier in a mountain cap and a Nazi uniform. The Edelweiss was an emblem of the German mountain troops during World War II. Also in 2014, reports said locals in the same area found the burial site of German infantry, believed to have been killed in an avalanche years earlier. Further studies are desperately needed before they vanish from public view.
And if you're asking for more proof, photos were taken of a bizarre cloud formation over Northern California. Now, these pictures appeared all over Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and there's a very unusual and strange hole in the sky. And the people in California looked up and they were speculating what could possibly have caused it, because it wasn't an anomaly like they'd ever seen before. Much of the speculation seems to think that the bright cloud was where a UFO traveling at speed literally burst through Earth's atmosphere. Is it the wormhole from Donnie Darko, some people were shouting? They're now known as a phenomenon all of their own called fall streak holes, a striking atmospheric phenomenon. Now, you say, well, if it could be a UFO traveling at high speed, surely a meteorite traveling at high speed could leave the same thing. Well, yes, that's true. But once that hole appeared, everybody was watching the sky. They didn't see any craft. They didn't see any meteorite. And nothing seemed to hit the ground. So what causes it? The fall streak hole. They've given it a lot of very sassy names, various scientists. And yet, there's nothing on Earth that can recreate it. Then, we say we look around. Have we looked everywhere? Well, what about on the ocean floor? Because they have discovered an ancient UFO base beneath the sea, courtesy of Google Earth. Humans are yet to explore the deepest parts of the sea. And deep below the Pacific Ocean lies what one researcher deems a perfect pyramid. Using Google Earth, this structure, now think about this, is 8.5 miles across. This is not something that's small. 8.5 miles across. At first, some people thought, could it be a UFO parked underwater or an enormous alien base? And one of the researchers in Argentina, Marcelo Igazusta. He was the first to lay eyes on the structure itself. Using the coordinates that Google Earth set, he spotted a beam of light shining from the deep. Something down there was lit up. And this, of course, led to a lot of other people trying to get there very, very quickly for this monumental discovery. And when they got there, they found out the pyramid does measure 8.5 miles across one side of its base. It could be up to 11 miles across, depending on what's at ground level. The massive structure might be hard to make out because it does look slightly blurry on the screen, but it is big enough to be an anomaly again, that people have no idea who built it, what it's for, where it came from, and also, how do you build a pyramid under the sea? Remembering that the sea at that point had been there for probably a good million years. Waring explains that the perfect pyramid is adjacent to Mayan and Aztec pyramids in Mexico, if you follow the line of the earth around. Now, they say ancient pyramids were constructed by humans, but only creatures out of this earth could possibly accomplish such a massive structure, especially underwater. And even if this is not a UFO that landed in the ocean, that was being used as an alien base, it's still amazing to discover something like this in a place where no one expected it. And also, what keeps lighting up? So, if you think that aliens have not visited here, how can you explain stuff like this? An object 8.5 miles wide, possibly up to 11 miles, created by something, someone, but to have perfect corners, perfect edges, perfect angles. This is not something that's been created purely by nature. And then if you're looking for something else, what was the odd structure found in the Egyptian desert? Now, we know there's been a lot of trouble in the Middle East for the longest time, and yet a bizarre structure in the desert, visible again on Google Earth, sparked major speculation from UFO hunters. I've seen the photograph of this. It's metal, it's buried in the sand, it's immense, and it's east of the capital, Cairo. There's two long buildings, almost something that looks star-like. It has a futuristic design, and some believe it is a UFO that's crashed into the desert. The existence of this building, if it is a building, was highlighted by Secure Team 10, who described it in UFO sighting magazines and ratings. It is unlike anything on planet Earth. Now, there's two lots. It's almost like there's two UFOs that just crashed, and then over the years the sand has kind of blown over them. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 circular things surrounding two edges of a star, and under the sand, in some of the other angles, it looks like there could be more star shapes. A lot of people were skeptical. However, the people that have seen it said it's either a man-made nuclear bunker that has been unearthed by the sand, or it's something from another planet that we have no explanation for. Which way do you roll on that?
You know what I think, Doctor? I think I should allow you to introduce Colonel Corso. Many people will not know who Colonel Corso is. They might know he's got a book called The Day After Roswell, and that might be about all they know. What would you say of Colonel Corso beyond that?
Well, I first met Colonel Corso about a year ago, and he came to us with a very unusual story, and that had to do, of course, with alien technology and the things that he has written about in his book. One of the things that struck us, of course, was his credentials, and of course sometimes people fake them. So I spent a week in Washington checking out his background. And I went to the Pentagon, the National Archives, the Army military history. I also went to the Army War College because a key person in all of the things that he talks about is a Lieutenant General Art Trudeau. And Trudeau in the Army and military at all was a legend. In fact, he was so well known that when the Army started doing their oral histories, he was one of the first 8 people to be interviewed. Now, where this gets important is that during this interview, Phil Corso sat in every session with the general. So here it is, 20 years after they both retired, and they still remained very close friends. And one of the stories is he actually got his boss fired at one time, which is not usually career-enhancing, but survived that and remained to be very close friends. So what I can say is when Phil says he was in the National Security Council, he was in this Foreign Technology Division in the Pentagon. It should not be confused with the thing at Wright-Patterson. This was a small Army thing. Basically, it was Phil, and a position that he held until he retired, looking at foreign material. And, of course, he claims that this, some of it at least, was from the crash saucer.
So it would be fair to say the colonel is a former Army intelligence officer.
That's true.
All right.
He worked in with a heavy background in research and development.
Anyway, I've got a little bit more on the colonel, and I'd like to read it. Former intelligence officer, yes. Part of the Allied occupation forces in Rome from 1944 through 47. At the end of World War II, Operation Paperclip, which brought German rocket scientists to the United States. During the Korean War, he served under General MacArthur, and from 1953 through 57 as a member of the National Security Council under President Eisenhower. It was in 1961 that Colonel Corso was appointed Chief of the Army's Foreign Technology Division. It was then, on a certain fateful day, as the colonel tells it, that a file cabinet was wheeled into his office, the contents of which he was asked to examine by Trudeau. Corso was advised the contents were not, quote, run-of-the-mill foreign stuff, unquote, and was suggestively told to research the Roswell file before writing up his summary. Among the items in the cabinet, the colonel says he found a mysterious shoebox of tangled wires, a dull, grayish, silvery foil-like swatch of cloth that he was unable to fold, bend over, tear, or wad up, but that bounded right back into its original shape without any crease. I wonder if any of you recall from the movie that exact description. Visually, you saw that material in the movie Roswell. And though it was a dramatic reenactment, that was obviously very much like we have described here. And that is just the beginning. So there are many, many questions. All right, let's see if we can bring him on. Colonel, are you there?
I'm here.
And what I'd like you to do, if you'd be willing, is to tell us about your own background.
My background, well, I came in the Army 1940, when the war started, right after Pearl Harbor. And I was drafted, and I went to officer school, and I came out as second lieutenant, and they put me in an artillery outfit. Right after that, I got transferred to intelligence. And I was sent to England, got promoted to first lieutenant, and I joined British MI-19, and they sent me to Cambridge for 3 weeks, and I learned intelligence under them. And from there, I went to North Africa. I became an interrogator, prisoners of war, and worked with the British and with their commandos. Then I went to North Africa. And from North Africa, I participated in the landing at Salerno Harbor in Italy. Then I came up through Italy all the way to Cassino. And I was in the battles of Cassino. And from there I landed on the beach at Anzio, and then went into Rome. And there they made me Assistant Chief of Staff G2 Intelligence and Intelligence and Security Chief of Rome Area Command. And I participated there in reestablishing law and order. I destroyed the Gestapo and SS nets. And from there I came back to Fort Riley, Kansas.
So your career to the point that you met the general was a very honorable.
It was in combat at the time. We were fighting the war in North Africa, Sicily, and Italy. And then I joined the general. I went to Korea after that. I participated in the Korean War, and I joined MacArthur's staff over there. And I came back. When I came back to the States, I joined President Eisenhower as one of his military aides in the National Security Council at the White House. And there my career sort of changed. I was in the White House for 4 years. And from there I took command of a missile battalion, the Army's missile firing range at White Sands.
Mm-hmm.
Then I took a combat missile battalion, and I had atomic warheads even, to Germany. And I stayed in command 18 months, and then I became Inspector General of 7th Army. And from there I came back to the United States, and General Trudeau had reorganized research and development of the Army. And he sent for me, and I joined him as a special assistant and chief of the Foreign Technology Division.
So you had a very, very long military career before you met General Trudeau.
Yeah, well, I met him when he was chief of Army Intelligence. Well, what happened is I brought General Trudeau what we called the National Intelligence Estimates. These were the basis for U.S. policy, and they were made by CIA.
All right, so now you went to work for General Trudeau, and this is where things begin to get interesting for you.
Yes.
At this point, again, you had never laid hands on anything extraterrestrial, probably hadn't seen a UFO or anything else. In other words, you were not any sort of ufologist or even interested.
I saw a body at Fort Riley, Kansas, but I put that out of my mind until I could corroborate information, like in intelligence, and prove it. And later there were some experiences that happened. My radars were picking up objects at White Sands when I commanded the range battalion, traveled 3,000 or 4,000 miles an hour.
I guess that we better back up then. If you saw a body at Fort Riley, Texas, tell my audience...
Kansas. It was in Kansas.
Kansas. Tell my audience that story.
Well, what it was, I was appointed one night post-duty officer. Actually, lately there have been some criticisms. They said that the security was lax at Fort Riley if I did that. But I was the security officer that night, or the post-duty officer. And people know the Army know that when you're appointed post-duty officer, you're responsible for all the guards and security all that night on the post.
Why would anybody criticize that? I was in the Air Force, Colonel, and I remember that most all bases had an on-duty officer for the night.
The critics didn't know this. They weren't in the Army. And really that night, I was the security. And when I went down, one of my sergeants, Master Sergeant I knew well, was Sergeant of the Guard because we had horses in the area, the veterinarian area. And these I think it was 5 of them, yes. There was 5 boxes there that looked like caskets. And I went on in the room, because I was a security officer, I had to go inspect it. They told me there was sensitive cargo there. It come by truck.
Was it in transit, or was that...
It was in transit.
It was in transit, all right.
I'll tell you how I knew that. Now, I went in and I picked up the tarp, and I saw this body. Of course, I turned a little bit. At first I thought it was a young, baby or something. Then I got a little bit turned, like you do in combat, something like that happens, your stomach gets upset, but you recover fast.
Mm-hmm.
And I told the sergeant, get out of here, because sensitive area, I don't want you in trouble. Go out to your post, and I'll be out in a second. I put the tarp back down, Now, this only lasted 10 or 15 seconds.
And what do you recall seeing? You say you saw a body, Colonel.
I saw an extraterrestrial, skinny arms, skinny legs, under 5 feet, had a fairly large head. Not large, but compared to the body, it was large. And the eyes, they were slanted eyes, no nose, no mouth, no ears. And it was floating in some liquid, and it was a gray color. And that's what I saw. And I immediately dismissed it. I figured, I don't know what it is until I can corroborate like an intelligence, maybe later. And later on, I was able to prove what it was.
Do you know what that liquid was?
No, I had no idea.
Uh-huh. And you say there were a total of 5. Is that correct? 5 caskets or 5, if that's what you want to call it?
No, they were crates-like, but they had a liquid in them. The thing was floating in some sort of liquid.
Okay, what date was this, as best you can recall?
It was 1947. It was in July.
July.
Because I went to Fort Riley, Kansas. I was stationed out there with garrison duty. We had an intelligence aggressor force we were setting up for the military, and we were writing courses for intelligence. And I joined the Department of Non-Resident Instruction at Fort Riley, Kansas.
All right. Since you're an eyewitness to this, and you're now 82 years old, is that correct?
82.
It's very, very important that we be very clear about what you saw there. This is a very key point, I believe. The Air Force, as you well know, had a news conference and said, well, they were dummies. Now, is there any chance that what you saw, and in fact, as you know, the Air Force at their news conference showed these dummies that they dropped in later years, 1953 actually, but even if they had dropped them in 1947, they might have. Could you have been looking at a dummy, a non-being?
You know, I told people in late interviews that I will not criticize the sister service, and I won't, because I fought in Korea with them, and I have a lot of friends in the Air Force, but their superiors I will criticize. There was no question in my mind what it was. I know the difference between a body like that I saw there and a dummy, or even a monkey like some said, and then they've even come forth and said maybe it was Japanese in that balloon. I don't know where they get these stories or why they make them up. It's beyond comprehension to me. They don't have to do this.
So you saw a creature, there's no question about it.
Yes.
I take it, Colonel, you saw the Air Force's news conference, correct?
Yes.
And you saw the dummies that they showed that were dropped, correct?
Impossibility.
And that is not what was in that...
No chance.
No chance. All right. Do you know where these bodies were next headed?
I do know. When I came out, I asked the sergeants on the guard that night.
Right.
I asked, and they said, they said, we talked to the drivers. It came from an air base in New Mexico. There was 5 trucks. Mm-hmm. And they were heading for Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. The boys, they had a driver and a co-driver, each truck. And the soldiers told the sergeants that.
Alien Jesus 5 Legacy. Alien Jesus 5 Legacy.
June 14th, 1992, 10:24 p.m. For almost 2 minutes, the waters of the Pacific Ocean explode with light as hundreds of bright, disc-like craft are witnessed flying out of the water together. Similar to other reports of USOs exiting the water, these craft emerge from the Pacific in almost complete silence. They reportedly hover for a moment before bursting into space. Reports of this incident were phoned into local police departments as far away as Malibu. The following is an actual call that was placed on that day.
Officer, Sheriff Station. Did anyone report anything strange tonight? More than one specific strange light. Light? What exactly happened to you? I'm ashamed to tell you because I think you're going to think I'm crazy. We saw what we thought was a bright light up in the sky. Okay. We could hear it wasn't a helicopter. I'm telling you, I have never been more frightened in my life.
According to Dennett, the incident was also reported to the U.S. Coast Guard sector in Long Beach, which ultimately declined the search request. This 1992 event was the second in Los Angeles in 3 years. On On the dark, foggy morning of February 7th, 1989, scuba divers, boat sonar systems, and people on the shore witness a long, dark, unidentified craft dive out of the Pacific. For about 90 seconds, the USO rests just above the surface before emitting about a dozen smaller, fast-moving objects. 60 seconds later, the craft dives back underwater. Its last reported sonar heading was south toward the Santa Catalina Channel before it disappeared.
Oh, listen, there's some kind of wagon coming. Can you hear that in the distance as well? The one thing I will say, for an area of land that's supposed to be secret, there's an awful lot of people involved with keeping this place safe. I saw the dog patrol from a distance. I must admit, I stood behind a small bush and hoped that nobody would bark in my direction. And they were about, I don't know, half a mile away. And the good thing about it being so flat and so wide open is you can see clearly in all directions. Police car now, do you hear it? Or have they spotted me and they're coming to see me? Oh my goodness, my stomach's turning over, because the one thing I don't want, you got to remember that whenever I take a break, I also try and get a holiday somewhere along here, and I certainly don't want to be in prison, and that would also have marital implications. So here I am. Oh, it's gone. It's quiet. Oh, and they're back with their dogs. Oh, good gracious! Let me just quickly, hang on, stand behind this bush here. Oh, brambles as well. Nasty damn things. Right, I'm just going to stand here for a second, because, oh my goodness, this sounds like it's getting... I don't know whether you can hear this, but there's some people over there there's some people in the distance running away from some of the dog people. This must be normal for Roswell, I'm guessing. The extremities, this is why there's so much distance from the edge of Area 51 to the middle, because they're off and they're far out of sight now. But I did see a police car, one of those big highway patrol vehicles, bombing down the road after it. This must be just how it is here. Now, they tried to get round the veil of secrecy here with a report on CBS television 60 Minutes, because Area 51 was being sued. Oh, hang on. I'm getting more dogs in all directions. I'm getting a bit freaked by this whole thing. A number of workers at the base had a lot of strange symptoms, like their skin turning red and falling off. Several died, and their relatives are suing the American government. Other employees have come forward and stated the base is engaged heavily in illegal toxic waste dumping from its experiments on these spacecraft, and it's resulted in employee deaths. Now, if this goes to court, the whole Area 51 being a risk to national security, as well as being sued for a fortune, or will they just pay that fortune to keep it quiet? Now, Bill Clinton was president when this first came to book. It still hasn't been sorted out yet. Physicist Bob Lazar said he's worked on alien spacecraft here at Area 51. He says they've got 9 alien saucers housed there, and they're learning from them. Some of the spacecraft are very early, some of them are more recent, and yet they're still being reverse engineered. He's got evidence. He's taken evidence home with him, and Lazar was working as a bookkeeper, and one of his clients was working and running a prostitution ring on the side, and because of that, the government said, you can't rely on this man who gets involved in criminal activities, blah, blah, blah. But he knows what he saw. There's also another Area 51 worker whose name nobody will give, but the name he plays under on the internet is J-Rod 2. He's a 70-odd-year-old retired engineer. He says he's worked for 30 years designing reproductions of alien flying saucers. He says he's seen greys being moved around during his work. He says former employers have given him permission to speak semi-publicly about it. But he says that the project is far more advanced than anybody could possibly imagine. But we're also looking everywhere else with a million stories from places all over the world, as you'd expect from us. We've been flying above Peru, we've been down early observatories in France, we've been across the whole world seeking out these incredible stories from the pyramids, from Vatican City. And tonight we've got even more for you on Alien Jesus 5. Sometimes it's quite schizophrenic, the stuff that we do, because we could be away in a foreign land giving you an amazing show, or trying to at least, and then we think, oh, hang on a second, this is for our next Alien Jesus. Like these that we did when we were over in Ireland recently. When you get out in the countryside like this in Ireland, it has so many comparisons with Northumberland or the Yorkshire Dales, because Ireland is the bit that chipped away, that floated off to sea. But it was part of our island once, when we were maybe part of the European mainland. Now, a lot of years ago, while I was here in Ireland, I was researching leprechauns. And it was easy to link them to ghostly phenomenon. After all, they're rarely seen, often showing themselves carrying out mischievous activity or racing around homes when you're asleep, people hearing noises or switching electrical gadgets on and off. It's easy to say that maybe they are the same thing, yet maybe we're missing something that may appear obvious to outsiders, that these tiny subhuman forms could have been, or maybe still are, visitors from another planet. Now, I know you're already going, Howie Allen. Yet maybe we're missing something. The folklore of the little people goes back to almost 5,000 years BC and solidified in Ireland's most endearing history, Tuatha Dé Danann. At first, they were tiny creatures that were not remotely like man. One early poem said, "From a land unlike any other, they were unlike us in most every way." Yet by the time you move on to the 1800s, Christian writers wrote derogatory things about them, claiming they were little bearded men who stole your boots so that they could mend them. They hid a pot of gold at the end of a rainbow. Yet if you go back to the real history, to the more ancient text that until recently had not even been associated with leprechauns, it says in a text that was written 700 years before the Bible, "The little ones travelled in a shining star that fired rainbows behind it, and once it came forth, the land was glowing like a golden sun." Now, cheapened by the Christian version of burying pots of gold at the end of a light anomaly, at least the older version would make sense today. The word leprechaun is a compilation of two Irish words, lu, meaning small, and corp, meaning body, originally being known as the lupercorpse. In one of the earliest writings about these people, the King of Ulster fell asleep to find himself being dragged into the sea by small humanoid creatures who could breathe underwater. Now the king wrestles himself free and he captures these little people, and they gave him 3 wishes in exchange for their release. Historian and Christian David Russell McNally wrote, "Leprechauns are the sons of evil spirits." William Butler Yeats was more believing in fairies, other small creatures that feature in legends that also go back 5,000 years before Christ. Yeats said, "I have seen such things, and they have powers that are not of this earth." And yet, let's hold back and look around what else was happening around the world 5,000 years BC. In Mexico, there are hundreds of stories of tiny creatures from the stars that are regularly seen there. And even as recently as August 2008, the Sun newspaper featured a story from Lake Tahoe in Florida. A local man spotted a tiny leprechaun elf fleeing a forest that he was walking in. The figure, no more than 3 feet tall, was captured on camera running from the woods. The film was tested, it hadn't been doctored, at a time before Photoshop was common. The man, called Deneur, said, "When I took the picture, I'm sure that there was no one there. Yet when people saw the picture, they all said, 'But what's that?'" Now, I've got a military background. I don't really believe in aliens, but I can't explain this. His friend told the world that he'd captured a picture of the first ever real leprechaun ever caught on camera. And if you study Celtic, Norse and Germanic folklore, small creatures who came down from the stars are incredibly common. In each case, families were warned that these creatures, especially fairies, would try to steal your farm animals or children, sometimes even returning them weeks later with strange marks on their skin. Is this not exactly like modern-day alien abduction stories? All the 18th century bull about tiny little people wearing red and green coats was merely a British stereotype of Irish people. It had nothing to do with the ancient stories. And I once travelled along a fairy path near Dublin Castle, and you do feel something that genuinely feels different, strange, even ethereal. I knew the second that I stepped on that path. I didn't need somebody to tell me. It was an electricity that you feel when you cross a ley line, or very similar. And I once was lucky enough to visit Mount Shasta after people told me that this was the home of strange little people, basing themselves in the myriad of strange underground caverns on the site. There were earthworks, and you could see how some of the land had been worked by tools, yet others seemed burned into tunnels, leaving rocks, kind of similar to the sort you would see in a volcanic eruption. The more you look, the more you find that leprechauns, maybe elves, fairies, pixies, dwarves, maybe they're all actually a direct link to what the rest of society describe as the Greys. Let's give the phenomenon just a brief overview to see if there's any things that could link them together. Fairy circles have been claimed to be just an agricultural anomaly, but what if they were the landing areas for small craft? Maybe that's why plants grow in complete circles. The inner circle burned away. The earliest description of aliens in Celtic history, they said their faces looked like lizards or reptilian. Now, many people believe that aliens look like that too. 90% of all fairy tales show them trying to abduct people or creatures, just like alien stories do. Those who claim to have seen fairies claim they can fly in tiny circular globes, rather like orbs, or are they actual flying craft? Many taken by aliens claim not to be able to recall what happened to them, and that was the case in almost all fairy abductions too. Just imagine for 1 second if we interbred with other species from the stars, and Earth is still full of hybrids. In ancient British pagan tradition, gnomes and fairies were trying to abduct humans all the time. Others claimed they helped small villages learn building techniques and how to grow their crops a better way. The pagans, believing purely in nature, believed sky travellers that were called gnomes were sent to protect the planet from ourselves. They claim to this day that the word gnome means guarding naturally over Mother Earth. In Germanic legends, trolls and elves were said to be able to fly in crafts with fiery tails, living like leprechauns in underground places, often pursued by local villagers who had no idea what they were. In some cases, an elf threw fire at an angry mob so he could escape them, setting at least 3 men on fire. They survived by jumping in the river. Another escaped a group of soldiers who all saw him clearly, and once he was trapped, he merely flew away. Professor Strassmann from a German university visited South America, studying tribal beliefs of the Mayan, the Aztec, the Inca. They all told stories of tiny people traveling there from the stars, living in underground caverns. They believed that they wanted to know if we were a threat to them. They had great powers and they were exalted by our leaders. In Aborigine, Maori and Hawaiian traditions, they claimed that tiny people flew down from the skies to help them learn the secrets of life and living. Some stole their family members but returned them. Others helped them heal the very sick and taught them many things. So if we can say anything with any certainty, it is that 5,000 years before Christ, peoples on all 5 continents experienced something unique. Visitations of little people who came from the stars in a craft that landed in an explosion of bright light. These characters exhibited all of the same trends wherever they went and are all described the same way, unlike any other being found on the planet. These cuddly little leprechauns seem a very different prospect now, don't they? The Christians, having hundreds of years to paint them like stupid fairy story folk so as not to disrupt people's blind belief in their faith. For if any alien life exists and is proven to exist, all religious books are proven to be a lie, for they all claim Earth to be the only planet with the only true God, prophet, etc. Perhaps we're all on the verge of momentous change, a change like the world has never experienced before. So there it is, the New Grange Monument, directly ahead, a huge flying saucer-shaped thing with tall standing stones around it. I mentioned that back in the day there used to be 35 of them, and now there's about a dozen. The Chamber of New Grange, now a world-renowned megalithic mound, and a place where so many people have heard the voices of the dead. Acoustic expert David Keating carried out a raft of experiments there, and even he believed that the building was set out in such a way it actually changes the way that sound carries. Along with archaeologist Aaron Watson, they tried hundreds of different noises below ground, and the chamber actually changes the sound. A popping balloon isn't a bang anymore, it's a click. Yet a human voice could carry almost half a mile, even if it's just whispered. It would take a technology far beyond ours to actually create such a thing like that. Yet this was built 5,000 years ago. So how could a primitive man have such an in-depth knowledge of acoustics? Loud sounds get swallowed here, yet quiet conversation gets spread over an area of a few square miles. Over centuries, visitors to New Grange believed the sound of voices to be the sound of the long-buried dead communicating with one another. Yet it may well have merely been the voices of their fellow visitors over a mile away, heard as clear as day. Yet every loud noise tried inside the chamber was condensed to almost nothing, and to this day we still don't have that type of technology. Yet here it is, created, so it seems, by people who had no grasp of the most basic mathematics. Perhaps that's what it was, a device to stop loud noise spreading over a great distance. Was this to muffle the roar of a craft taking off from Earth or landing? And there's also a mystery about these standing stones. From where I am at the moment, there's one, two. About 20 yards further south, there's another one. There's the stump of one poking through the grass. A bit more of a tree stump. And then 1, 2, 3, taller than a man. When the wind is at a certain strength and in a certain direction, these stones, once numbering 35, would vibrate, and they would create their own high-pitched sound. Was this sound amplified by this incredible megalithic mound, sending sound off into the stars, maybe as a beacon to guide outsiders to this very place? Sadly, we have no fully original standing stones still in one piece to judge them by. Merely the weathered remnants that have all been ravaged and stolen by people over the decades. The amazing thing is that everything, all the stones seem to have been stolen, and yet the mound itself is completely immaculate, as it was 5,000 years ago. We got crows, as you could hear, making, just flying around my head and standing on top of the standing stones. We know that many of these remnants of standing stones sing and generate almost musical notes, and often these stones are around a central configuration that could so easily channel that sound. Also, every stone has an astronomical significance to stars or planets that primitive man wouldn't know, nor would have they been able to see them. And of course, because they were pagan, all of the windows on the long tombs and all of the windows here are directed to the rise of the winter solstice, the summer solstice, the spring solstice. Scientists desperate to claim knowledge of these ancient monuments, to have espoused hundreds of possible uses for these magical places, and yet to this day none of them really ring true. And as I place my hand on the monument just to my side here, it's like you're crossing 5,000 years. The quartz on the outside helping seal it, shining in the moonlight. And yet 5,000 years ago, someone was doing exactly what I'm doing now. It's amazing. Come and see this amazing New Grange monument. Maybe not just a monument for Earth, but a universal monument. Many people claim that this is absolute proof of intervention from the stars. This very month is the 70th anniversary of those craft coming down here at Roswell. 70 years this month. And yet all you can go by really are professional people. Now, everybody's heard of the U2 program. It's got nothing to do with the band. Oh, good gracious, they've turned back to and headed towards me now. I don't know whether they've actually seen me. Let me quickly get back in amongst the... Right, oh, I can see them. They're not casting any eye contact towards me at all. The wind is blowing in my face, so presumably it's blowing any smell that I've got for the dogs away from me. Listen to them. I mean, to say there's patrols here is an understatement. I've seen about 8 or 9, and I'm only probably 100 yards onto the territory. And I'm only here because part of the external fence had blown down and I was able to lope over the top of it. But one of the pilots who had heard about this Air Force base building these new U-2 strategic reconnaissance aircraft He was flying over Groom Lake, remember the other name for Area 51, and this is what he said. We flew over it, and within 60 seconds you knew this was the place by that dry lake. Man alive, we looked at that lake and we all looked at each other. It looked like Edwards Air Force Base. There were so many craft. We wheeled around, landed on the lake, taxied up to one end of it. It was the perfect natural landing field, as smooth as a billiard table without anything being done to it. In the distance, I saw craft that I knew was not from Earth. Now, they're moving craft around outside, surely not caring if satellites can pick up pictures of it. Are they that blatant and that bodacious? Well, this area, according to one of the pilots, he nicknamed Paradise Ranch, saying that the CIA's official history, they had built towers, workshops, trailer homes for their initial test personnel. And yet, it wasn't the aircraft they were building so much as the intelligence that they were learning from alien craft that they were putting in the new vehicles for use by the American Air Force. Alan Robson with you. I must admit, I'm a tad spooked. I'm just going to head kind of back towards, possibly not necessarily slowly either. I'm going to head back towards the car. Just don't know how far in I can get. What I do not want is to be arrested, and certainly not charged. But I think I've managed to get in a damn sight further than I thought that I would. And I've just got a t-shirt on, a pair of shorts, because the weather here, you're talking desert. And in the distance you can see that kind of heat haze rising off the pathways and off the roads. And looking around now just to see, I'm still probably a quarter of a mile away from where I parked the car. And I parked the car in a little hedgy area behind a road sign on the road, and jumped over the fence and legged it, because if you leave your car parked next to a hole in the fence, that's going to be the first place to look, isn't it? So we know the aliens have been here. We know that I mean, you're not going to put this amount of security on if there wasn't something here. Dogs real close. Oh, good goodness. Hang on. One of the patrols is here where I'm coming up towards where the motor thing is, and I'll get out of here. Oh, they're behind me. Got a lot of whole places chained up, as you can. Even when the fence gets a little bit low, there's this is where the fence is down. I'm now back on the public side of the fence, and the car, the little hire car, is just over here behind the bush. God, blame Usain Bolt. Didn't think I'd clear that kind of distance and that kind of speed, but listen to the next piece. I'm going to get myself sorted out, and I'm going to get myself out of here. Alan Robson, Alien Jesus 5.
Has there been any unique or unusual curveballs you've had to deal with?
Alan Robson with you now. I hope you can hear this, because I've had to put my talking device in my t-shirt pocket. Fortunately, I've got an external shirt pocket on this, so I'm now on the road. And you've got to drive past the main part of Area 51. Now, the one thing that I didn't notice coming up are the placement of cameras on lampposts, and there's a one here just on the right-hand side. Oh my God! Why did I see this coming in? It's in between fence posts. There's a grey metal stanchion, and on the top of the stanchion there's a camera looking at everything that goes in, presumably with people watching you. There's a car heading in the opposite direction. It's a white pickup truck. It's got orange lights on. The orange lights have just kind of tweaked. And it's coming directly towards me. I'm not going to talk for a moment.
Everything. You name it, we do it.
It's got past me. I'm looking at it in the rear view mirror. It's behind me now. It's turned around. It's following me. It's got orange lights flashing. Now, I'm going to make damn sure I'm not breaking any speed limits or anything. I'm on a public road. I don't presume there's anything they can do to me unless the cameras pick me up on their land, which is private land, I suppose. Oh, hang on. Oh, there's another white Dodge pickup truck. It's white. Oh, listen. Oh, no. Oh, thank heavens for that. Don't know whether you heard that, but a Nevada police unit's just gone straight up the road where I have just come from. Whether that had been sent out for me, because presumably they wouldn't know what kind of car I'm in. I am driving a little bit faster, but directly behind me I've still got that pickup with the orange lights, and it's keeping really fairly tight to my back bumper. This is the main highway, the extraterrestrial highway we were telling you about before, where at the side of the roads for the full length there's people selling alien juice and alien fruit. And oh, hang on a second, the pickup truck is directly to my left hand side. You got to remember, you drive on the left over here, and it's directly beside me, and it's just looking. And two men in shades just looking, and this is intimidating. This is intimidating. What do they expect me to do? And off they go. Blimey, just shot straight down a little side road there. Just stared at me. A foot away from my window. For a place that some people believe there's nothing going on. And if this is what happens every day to everybody that comes here, how incredible. There's obviously a lot more happening here than even we could possibly imagine. I got so many more things to show you today. Enjoy Alien Jesus 5. And how I didn't crap myself there, I really don't know. That was quite edgy.
I grew up in Roswell, New Mexico, which was the site of presumed alien crash in 1947, and which, from what I call the testimony of the old-timers who were there and who had been hushed up by government authority, military authority, almost on pain of death at the time, and who had harbored their knowledge quietly for years, that when I came back from the moon, and I was a local boy, they considered me safe enough to tell their story to, that they were a part of the recovery effort and the observer of the so-called Roswell crash, and that they knew for sure that it was an alien craft. And subsequent sightings, subsequent evidence has reaffirmed all of that we are being visited and have been visited by alien spacecraft and alien beings, and our governments around the world have covered it up, but only recently other governments have started to open their files, except the United States has still not started opening its files. But most of the major countries in Europe, South America, that have these files, and in Mexico, well, Belgium, France, Brazil, and Argentina, and Mexico have opened their files.
Somebody that knows stuff is always a joy to talk to, and we have paranormal radio show host Heather Wade, who has seen a top secret report. Let's find out all about it. Hello, Heather.
Well, good evening. It sure is a pleasure to be here, and I have that top secret, ultra top secret document right here in my hot little hand.
How did you get your hands on it in the first place?
Well, I have many, many listeners out there, and one of my listeners and a friend of his who is former military had been sitting on this document for a number of years, and they both recently got together and were catching up on things as friends do.
Sure.
And the other friend said, you know, we still have those papers. Do you know anyone who might be interested in that? And my friend said, actually, you know what? I sure do. And he thought he would hand it off to me. And what we did was try to figure out if this was previously released. So that was the first thing we did before anybody knew anything about it at all.
Right.
Before anybody knew that I even had it, we started going to CIA.gov and theblackvault.com and many websites like this, trying to figure out, has this already been released? And we couldn't find it anywhere.
Yeah.
So then I call up Stanton Friedman, and I said, hey, Stanton, will you look at something for me? And he said, well, sure, I'll take a look at it. And then I call up Art Bell, and I said, hey, Art, how many top secret government documents have you ever looked at? And he just stopped and paused, and he goes, why? I said, I want you to look at something. And so here I've now got Art Bell and Stanton Friedman looking at it. And then in about 8 minutes, Art calls me back, and he goes, where did you get this? And I told him, and he said, you have to release it. You have to release it right now.
Yeah,
this is brand new.
Yeah.
And Stanton's preliminary judgment, as he was examining it with a big old magnifying glass, because some of the text in there really is hard to read, he thinks on first inspection that it's authentic. Now, a lot of UFO people in the last few days have come out to say that they think that it's fake, but I haven't seen anybody come up with a substantial argument or any evidence to show me that it's fake. Anybody can point at something and say that it's fake. But you know, the more I look at it, and of course I'm getting a lot of emails from my listeners telling me, well, I've looked at top secret documents, and it looks like it's within the format to me. So I think people are protecting their reputations by saying that it's fake, and I can understand that, but I think this very well may be the evidence that a lot of us have been looking for decades.
Now, I mean, you're hitting the right kind of people with Stanton and Art there. Again, along with yourself, big names in the business dealing with all things UFO in the States. And yet, how come a whole bunch of people in black suits didn't come and say, well, let us have a look at that, we'll be the judge of it, give it to us? Because that kind of thing has happened in the past.
Well, I can tell you that my phone has had some, let's just say, unexplained anomalies lately. But no, I'm waiting for the men in suits to knock on my door, but they have not yet. So I don't know what that is about.
So for those that haven't heard about this stuff yet, what's actually in there then? I mean, tell us what it confirms.
All right, so it confirms Roswell. It also confirms a controlled landing in 1948 in Aztec, New Mexico. And I think the reason that this looks a little bit odd to most of us is because, well, most of us haven't seen documents that are addressed to the office of the president, which this one is.
Right.
So how many of us get to see papers that the President of the United States get to see? Not very many of us. So the first thing it outlines is what Majestic 12 is. That is the first thing that it talks about. And then after that, it talks about what MJ-12 is and does. It talks about advanced beings of non-human nature are continuously being detected along with their flying disc craft in the controlled space of the United States since the 7th of July, 1947. And get this, I hate to read on the air, but I hope you're sitting down. The remains of 7 flying craft and the bodies of 27 deceased non-human beings have been discovered as of this briefing date, which is January 8th, 1989, and are at present being studied by Magic 12 scientists. 3 of the recovered craft are nearly intact, and one such machine has maintained some of its power since retrieval in 1948. So that is some of the information about Majestic 12 and why they formed Majestic 12 in the first place. And it's their duty to evaluate the risk, control, and containment of the violation of United States airspace and national security by unknown and possibly hostile aliens of one or more advanced races of beings presumed to have originated elsewhere than on planet Earth. That's directly from the document. Then it goes into who Majestic 12 is, and a little more on that. The first case we get to, which is listed as a historical precedent in the document, says Roswell, New Mexico, July 7th, 1947. And it talks about there being a wreckage found. It was broken up into about 347 different pieces, but they found 4 dead and badly decomposed extraterrestrial bodies that were then removed and studied.
Wow.
And it's right there in black and white, Alan.
That whole thing, though, about numbers of craft, because, yes, we've all watched Independence Day and thoroughly enjoyed it, and we've watched alien movies since the 50s in drive-in cinemas or as a B-movie to a main feature. And yet, deep down, there's always been this kind of, well, it can't really be true. Well, yes, there must be life out there, but it's never going to touch ours. The shows that I've done over the last number of years have been travelling around the world looking at proof of alien intervention in places like Peru or Egypt or the underground cities of Turkey. We've been all over the place doing that. And yet to get so close to finally somebody of substance coming out with something that is, and it is proof what you have there, I have no doubt that it's proof. We've been waiting for it to come out, and yet when you hear it, you go, well, what does this mean in the historical sense? How is it going to change our world from this point on? What do you think?
Well, there's a number of things there. First, we have to consider the fact that here we have, in black and white, right here in our hands, and by the way, I'm not charging for anybody to look at it. Anybody can go to our website and download it for free of charge and look at exactly what I'm looking at. And the first thing we have to come to terms with is this is a government document that acknowledges the existence and the visitation of extraterrestrial life to Earth. What are we always told? There's no such thing as UFOs. Mm-hmm. Even if there were, they're not coming here. Well, this is the exact opposite of that. So that's the first thing we have to come to terms with. Second thing is, well, there is extraterrestrial life, and it's visiting Earth. Yeah. How do we, as human beings, come to terms with that? Well, I think the easiest way to come to terms with that is to realize that in this document, and I find this to be about the juiciest bit of information in here, it does discuss the 4 different types of extraterrestrial that they are familiar with so far. And in that list of different kinds of extraterrestrials, only one type is listed as possibly hostile, which I find very interesting because, okay, here we go. I might as well just lay this out on you, and then you can respond to it. Right. Non-humanoid EBEs. First off, we've got humanoid EBEs. We've got small humanoids or grays. Then we get to non-humanoid EBEs, extraterrestrial biological entities. These are in several classes and come from worlds where dominant morphology took a different evolutionary course. Many of these are dangerous not for organized hostile intentions, but because these creatures do not hold human life as sacred. To them, we're animals despite our intelligence. A few are friendly because of their cultures forbid all acts against living creatures. Thus far, contact has been minimal, with only a handful of unfortunate encounters. Now, if we were dealing with misinformation, wouldn't it be all about, well, the aliens just want to kill you and eat your babies? That's not what we find here.
Yeah, but it does infer that there's been some harm done. Some people have, apart from unfortunate, that's the kind of things you say when somebody at a zoo's been eaten by a tiger. Well, it was unfortunate. It does sound like some harm has been done to somebody somewhere down the road.
Yes, exactly right. Exactly right. So we don't have a perfectly sanitized picture of friendly extraterrestrials. We also don't have a demonized picture of extraterrestrials that want to peel your skin off in the middle of the night.
Right.
We don't have that. We've got a very balanced look at different kinds of extraterrestrials that are out there. We also have listed in the document transmorphic entities that I understand don't exactly have a body, or, in the words of the document here, transmorphic entities exist in some other dimension or plane, which is to say not in our space or time. So we've got to come to terms with, you were asking, how does this change the world? How does this change history? Well, we've got to come to terms with there are not only life forms visiting Earth, but 4 different types of life forms visiting Earth. And how does that affect history? Well, you get deeper into the document, and there's an alleged transcription of an interview with a humanoid EBE, and that humanoid EBE talks about visiting Earth 7,000 years ago. There's even a quote about going to the Isle of Pines in the Pacific Ocean 115 centuries ago.
Wow.
So that has big implications for religion.
We absolutely are on top of that. It renders every religious... The fact that there's alien life out there at all renders all of the books, the holy books, to being untrue, because they all say life was only on this planet. So it has massive implications. And also the thing that you said about entity that is not of this dimension could, if we're pushing this to the max, that could explain ghosts. Something from another dimension that we catch a glance of every now and then, but can't explain. So I don't know whether I'm just dancing further down the lane than we've reached, but this is a fascinating place to be.
Oh, no, you're right on. Actually, you're spot on, because let me continue here. TEs exist in some other... Okay, so I told you that. They do not use devices to travel in space. Only once has a member of an MJ-12 contact team been privileged to be present when introduced by an Earth-like EBE to a transmorphic entity. Now, this is the part you're going to be very interested in, Alan. In essence, these entities are composed of pure mind energy. They are not unlike ghostly spirits and seem to be only curious about our universe. They are said by other EBEs to be capable of taking on any physical form that they put their energy into as matter. This may very well explain the ghostly phenomena, the shadow person phenomenon, the half man, half other kind of creature that we see all throughout history.
Sure.
This very well may explain gods. I'm not sure.
Well, shapeshifters, my goodness. I've spent a batch of my life travelling, hunting ghosts and phenomenon of 1,000 types with varying degrees of success, and yet you get, and I must admit, just to let everybody know, you host a radio show called Midnight in the Desert, and an amazing thing it must be. I'm very jealous of the documents you got. I've had various things handed to me about British-related stuff over the years, but this is clearly probably the most important document that there's been in the last 100 years, surely.
Well, when it comes to ufology and the truth that you and I and so many other good people have been chasing, not for years, but for decades, people have been chasing the truth about the unexplained, about visitation to Earth, about so many things. And you know what, I would have handed it to you. I'd be more than happy to hand this over to you and give you the credit, because it's been a whirlwind. Ever since this was released, it's sort of taken on a life of its own, and I don't know if I'm happy or if I regret it a great deal.
Because
get my hands on this.
You see, what this does in a way is it steals pretty much everything you've been taught since you were a child. It steals all of that away and puts you in a new place. But I'd always rather be in the place where you're informed, where you have the truth, rather than you just have the story after story after story. I mean, religion essentially is a brainwashing from birth to believe whatever it is that whatever priest or imam tells you. Here we have something that we've been told doesn't exist for the longest time, and now we have what I think is fairly absolute proof what it does. And I just think that NASA have to announce and put their hands up and start telling us what they've got, because every now and then your president, usually just before they're elected, says, well, if I get in there, I'm going to tell everybody everything, and then, of course, they get in and they tell everybody nothing. I think what you've got there is immense. You should be thoroughly proud of yourself, Heather, because I think it's an amazing thing, and you've dealt with it in exactly the right way. You know, you've reached out to people that know, and they've all come to roughly the same view at the end of it all. You should be absolutely thrilled, and I'm honoured that I've had the chance to talk to you about it, Heather. It's been a total joy.
Oh, well, it has been a pleasure, and I highly encourage you, if you can, or anybody on your staff, to go to the website and download it and print out a copy. And when you print out a copy and you've got it in your hands, there's something about that just makes it a little easier to read, a little easier to look at, and it really has a big punch. And I think this has spooked ufology in general. And I just want to share one thing with you here before we go.
Sure.
There's a line in this document that really has grabbed a hold of me and sunk its hooks into me, and it is this. It's talking about how the different EBEs travel through space. And it says, some alteration or control of the passage of time on board the in-transit craft is used as well.
Whoa. And we heard that some of the craft had facets that were still workable. So what you're talking about here is ghosts, aliens, time travel, true.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. In the government's own words, in the government's own document prepared for President Bush. This would have been prepared for George H.W. Bush right before his inauguration. This January 8th, 1989. He would have took office January 20th, 1989, having won the election November 8th, 1988. So this is the paperwork that a president would have got right before he thinks he's going to spill the secrets. And this is just a beginning. It says in the document, this is just a preliminary briefing document. The full briefing will follow. So I can tell you, I would pay good money to see what that full briefing is.
Well, we're going to be waiting to see what the next step is, because it's out there, and I've felt over the last 4 or 5 years that something was coming, something mighty, and I believe this to be the beginning of it. And thank you so much for sharing your time, Heather. It's been a true joy, and I thank you for it.
Absolutely, it sure has. And thank you very much for having me on your show.
So whenever anybody says to you, there's no such thing as aliens, take it from me, they don't have literally thousands of people working here every single day because there aren't any aliens. They've got thousands of people working here every day because the things that are going on here are probably beyond our comprehension. Alan Robson, I hope you've enjoyed your time with us as we've shown you a few amazing things from around the world on Alien Jesus 5. And don't worry, 6 could be around any time soon.
Just selling insurance out of there.
From Area 51, Roswell, the Dreamland, for the Nightowls. From me, Alan Robson, good night, God bless you, and I wish you well.